Chapter 8:17. Xianyang, the headquarters of the Bloodlust mercenary group. Looking at the mysterious man in front of him, Bloody Romance said expressionlessly, "You mean, as long as I cooperate with you, I can smoothly take down the satellite city of the royal city of Xianyang?" 100%, the mysterious man said firmly. Crimson Romance snickered. "What are you laughing at?" Bloody Romance looked at him as if he was an idiot and said, "You're making a deal with me with something that belongs to me. I say, are you guys out of your minds?" You. The mysterious man was born in a noble family and had never been humiliated like this. He was about to lose his temper on the spot. But when he thought of the mission given by the organization, he finally suppressed his anger. The mysterious man said, "I don't understand what you mean." Bloody Romance shook his head and said, "With or without your help, the satellite city is already in the bag of the Bloodlust mercenary group. Do you understand?" Arrogant. The mysterious man was finally angry. "So, there's no room for negotiation?" Blood Romance gestured for him to leave and said, "Have a safe trip. I won't be seeing you out." The mysterious man glanced at Bloody Romance and said in a cold voice, "Don't think that you are really the overlord of Xianyang City. The power of the organization is beyond your imagination. Just wait and see." The mysterious man was in a bad mood after messing up the mission. Bloody Romance's expression didn't change. He made another gesture to see him off. "Humph, you don't know your place." The mysterious man threw down a harsh word and disappeared into the night. When the mysterious man was far away, Bloody Romance's expression changed again. It seemed to be excited, mixed with a trace of hatred. Such a complicated expression was really rare. "Do you think I won't know who you are if you don't tell me?" The hand of silver. The crimson romantic eyes suddenly became cold, overflowing with cold air. He actually knew the existence of the silver hand. The drama in the wilderness was getting more and more interesting. Shanghai City, southern border. Late at night, the noisy city that never slept finally returned to peace. The lively crowd couldn't resist the heavy drowsiness and exhaustion, and gradually dispersed. Only the lanterns were left, stubbornly emitting a weak light in the vast night sky. All kinds of rubbish and sundries were left in the square, testifying to the carnival last night. After watching the lanterns with Song Jia, Ouyang Shua didn't rest, but walked to the study. The large study room was quiet. Under the shroud of the night, it was even somewhat eerie. That familiar figure was nowhere to be seen. Ouyang Shua didn't care. Only here could he really calm down, savor the loneliness, and plan for the territory. Many plans for the territory were made by Ouyang Shua on such nights. Here, in this quiet night, Ouyang Shua's mind was exceptionally clear. While watching the lanterns at night, Ouyang Shua, at his current cultivation level, any trace of abnormality or fluctuation in his heart lake represented something unusual. It was precisely because of this that Ouyang Shua came to the study. He wanted to find the source of the uneasiness. As soon as he sat down, Ouyang Shua saw that there were 2 secret letters on the table, and it was obvious that they had just been delivered during the night. "King," Yang Fei said, he, King, Sword of Thunder as, Yang, Moon our King, as is, he as long as he have as he as, he I, why is Sword of Thunder writing to me at this time? Ouyang Shua frowned. Things were getting stranger and stranger. He didn't have many dealings with Sword of Thunder, but Lin Jing, Song Jia, Love Thread, and other women had a close relationship with Sword of Thunder. Most recently, they were discussing an order for weapons and equipment. Did something happen? Do they need to urgently deploy a batch of weapons and equipment? Ouyang Shua could only guess. He didn't dare to delay and open the letter, only to see a short line. "I'm sorry, please be careful." Ouyang Shua couldn't understand. What does it mean? He noticed the names of several guild leaders at the end of the letter. Aren't they the leaders of Luoyang's major guilds? Ouyang Shua was even more confused. Since he couldn't figure it out, Ouyang Shua decided to ignore it and open the letter. He had a premonition that he would find the answer in this letter. Sure enough, Bai Hua was talking about the bright moon illuminating the river being arrested by the Ministry of Justice. Bai Hua's anxiety and uneasiness could be seen in the letter. After reading the letter, Ouyang Shua frowned. He had a premonition that Silver Hand had already started to take action. What Sword of Thunder warned him to be careful of in the letter was probably Silver Hand. In other words, a Tingyu Tower had already been taken down by Silver Hand. This is really bad news. Ouyang Shua muttered to himself. Do they want to start from the periphery? His mood was getting heavier. The opponent this time was obviously more difficult to deal with than Yan Huang Alliance. They were calmer and more cunning. They didn't directly attack Shanghai City. Instead, they wanted to take down Shanghai City's periphery layer by layer and then give Shanghai City a fatal blow. This is a very patient opponent, Ouyang Shua concluded. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua first wrote a letter to Bai Hua to reassure him. In the letter, Ouyang Shua roughly explained Silver Hand to Bai Hua and told him to be patient. Ouyang Shua was worried that Bai Hua would do something impulsive. After sending the letter, Ouyang Shua's mood was still not relaxed. The night before the opening of the satellite city, Breeze Pavilion and Tingyu Tower were in trouble. What about the other guilds that were related to Shanghai City? Would the top 10 guilds like Baleful Blood Mercenary Group, Alaojun Temple, and Flowing Light Pavilion, or even the second-tier guilds like Shadow Tower and Dream Tower encounter the same trouble? Or did they already encounter trouble but didn't tell him like Sword of Thunder? Ouyang Shua had no way of knowing. His mind was a mess. He needed to sort it out. In the quiet study room, Ouyang Shua leaned on the recliner alone, closing his eyes and meditating. His fingers rhythmically tapped on the table. He wanted to peel the silk from the cocoon and tear apart the fog in front of him, but he didn't know where to start. According to a Silver Hand's style, since they made a move, it wouldn't be a small fight. Among all the guilds, a Snow Death Rose mercenary group was the least likely to be defeated by Silver Hand. Silver Hand was probably well aware of the relationship between the two guilds. Ouyang Shua immediately realized, Snow Death Rose is in danger. He wanted to pick up his pen and write a letter to his aunt, Lin Jing, reminding her to be more vigilant. After writing a line, he put down his pen again. No, it's too late. Ouyang Shua looked up at the night outside the window. It turned out that it was already the second half of the night. In another 3 or 4 hours it would be dawn. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua didn't hesitate anymore. He decided to go to Jianya overnight. Guards! My lord. Hearing the voice, Su Chu, who had been guarding outside the door, came in. Ouyang Shua said, Assemble the team and prepare to go out with me. Su Chu nodded and asked, Should we bring the divine martial guards? Ouyang Shua thought for a moment and said, Bring them. Now that the world was unstable, he didn't dare to take it lightly. Also, call Xiahou Dun. I'm going to the armory. Yes. Su Chu turned around and went to make the arrangements. However, Ouyang Shua still felt a trace of unease. For the first time, he truly felt the great pressure that Silver Hand brought him. They really think highly of me, Ouyang Shua muttered to himself. After a while, Xiahou Dun hurried over. Looking at his expression, he was woken up from his sleep by the guards. Even a corner of his clothes was exposed, and he didn't tidy up properly. My lord! Before he came, Xiahou Dun splashed his face with cold water to wake him up. Since the lord summoned him in the middle of the night, there was probably something urgent. Xiahou Dun naturally didn't dare to be negligent. Ouyang Shua said, Thank you, Lord Xiahou. This humble subject is ashamed. Since the lord was still in the study, how could Xiahou Dun dare to say that it was hard? Time was tight, so Ouyang Shua didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, How many 3-bow 8-bull bed crossbows and divine armed crossbows are there in the armory of the war division? Ouyang Shuo was worried about Snow Death Rose, and wanted to send another batch of equipment overnight. For a guild war, especially to defend a satellite city, there was no weapon stronger than the divine armed crossbows and divine armed crossbows. Even the P1 cannon couldn't compare to the 3-bow 8-bull bed crossbows in terms of long-lasting damage. Moreover, cannons were inconvenient to carry, so it wasn't a good time to send them over. Xiahou Dun immediately answered, 253-bow 8-bull bed crossbows and 15,000 divine armed crossbows. The divine armed crossbows were the long-range weapons that the guilds preferred. Most of the guild's orders included divine armed crossbows. Therefore, there weren't many left in the armory. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo's transport capacity was limited, so he couldn't take too many. Ouyang Shuo nodded and said, "All right, bring me to the armory. I want to take 103-bow 8-bull bed crossbows and 5,000 divine armed crossbows. Register it." Even though Ouyang Shuo was a lord, he couldn't just take equipment from the armory. There were rules for everything. If Ouyang Shuo took as he pleased, someone would take advantage of the loophole and use his name to embezzle the armory. If that happened, the rules would be messed up. Yes. Xiahou Dun nodded and led the way in front. Even if Ouyang Shuo's storage bag had been upgraded to the highest level and had 10,000 cubic meters of space, he still couldn't store such a large amount of equipment. Moreover, other than the crossbows, he also had to carry the corresponding arrows. The arrows for the divine armed crossbows could be prepared by Snow Death Rose. But the jackdaw arrows, treading arrows, and one spear 3-sword arrows were unique to Shanghai City. Ouyang Shuo was only responsible for transporting 103-bow 8-bull bed crossbows and the corresponding arrows. His storage bag was already filled to the brim. The remaining divine armed crossbows were carried by the 3,000 divine martial guard. After finishing his preparations, Ouyang Shuo didn't stop. He led the guards and divine martial guards through the teleportation formation inside Monarch City and quietly disappeared into the night. Chapter 8:18. Jianye, Snow Rose Mercenary Group's headquarters. Just like Shanghai City, Jianye City also had a festive lantern festival. Gaia also launched the Lantern Festival, making the royal city even livelier. After the carnival, not to mention the city square, even the streets were littered with rubbish. Although there were no pedestrians on the streets, there were still lanterns leading the way. Ouyang Shuo and his party walked out of the teleportation array and smoothly arrived at Snow Rose's headquarters. More than 3,000 people walked on the street, carrying a large amount of equipment, but it was silent. Because tomorrow was the battle for the satellite city, Snow Rose's headquarters was loose on the outside and tight on the inside. As soon as Ouyang Shuo and his party arrived at the headquarters, they were seen by the guards and immediately ran to report. Seeing Ouyang Shuo, Lin Jing was greatly shocked and asked, "Little Shuo, it's so late, what are you doing here?" Ouyang Shuo inadvertently glanced at the street outside and said in a low voice, "Let's talk inside." On the way here, he noticed that someone was secretly monitoring Snow Rose's headquarters. This further confirmed Ouyang Shuo's guess. Seeing Ouyang Shuo's strange expression, Lin Jing immediately realized the seriousness of the matter and said, "Come in quickly." After entering the headquarters, Lin Jing arranged for people to receive the divine martial guards and the guards, and led Ouyang Shuo to the president's office. Xie Xiun received the news and also rushed over. "Little Shuo, tell me, what happened?" Lin Jing asked. Ouyang Shuo didn't know where to start. After all, it was Ouyang Shuo's personal guess that Silver Hand was going to deal with the guilds. There was no real evidence, so it was not good to say it clearly. "You are going to fight tomorrow, so I temporarily sent a batch of equipment," Ouyang Shuo said vaguely. Lin Jing was suspicious. "Are you okay? Sending equipment in the middle of the night?" Xie Xiun smiled to resolve the awkwardness and said, "Where can I find equipment from the sky?" "What kind of equipment?" Lin Jing asked. Ouyang Shuo said, 103 bow 8 bull bed crossbows, and 5,000 divine arm crossbows. Lin Jing also smiled and said, "That's a big deal." Ouyang Shuo didn't stay for long and said directly, "I got the information that someone is going to harm you in the battle for the satellite city tomorrow. I can't say too much about the specific matter. In short, you have to be fully prepared and don't fail. The opponent this time is not easy to deal with. It's very likely that they're here for me." Lin Jing and Xie Xiyun looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. Even though they were joking, they knew extremely clearly in their hearts that Ouyang Shuo was absolutely not a person that spoke without reason. Since he suddenly paid a visit like this in the middle of the night, then the matter had surely reached an extremely serious state. An enemy that was capable of causing the current Ouyang Shuo to be afraid of it was obvious how strong that enemy was. Lin Jing nodded solemnly and said, "All right, it's not convenient for you to tell me in detail, so I won't ask. With this batch of equipment, we'll have another layer of protection. No matter what tricks the enemy has up their sleeves, we are not to be trifled with." Ouyang Shuo stood up. "Then I'll be leaving first." Ouyang Shuo had already reminded him of what he needed to. As for the outcome of tomorrow's battle, it was better to let Lin Jing and Xie Xiyun decide. Lords could not directly intervene in the battles for the satellite cities. Leaving behind the equipment, Ouyang Shuo and the divine martial guards hurriedly left the Snow Rose encampment. In the shadow of an alley diagonally opposite a Snow Rose station, there were two men in black robes. Seeing Ouyang Shuo and his entourage walk out of the gate, one of them said, "That's right, it's Hao Wui. What is he doing so late at night?" "How would I know?" the other person said. "Could it be that he found out about us? It's impossible. I'm guessing that Dali's actions made Hao Wui suspicious, so he specially came to warn Snow Rose. According to Di Chen and the others, he's an old fox and very suspicious. Then, should we take this opportunity to kill him? How? Didn't you see that he has a large army protecting him? Even if we set up an ambush on the street, it won't be able to trap him. This person is indeed cautious. He came out so late and still has so many guards." "What cautious? I think he's just timid. No matter what, let's not beat the grass and startle the snake. Let's go." "All right, I'll listen to you. That kid is lucky." After a while, the two disappeared into the boundless night. Gaia 4th year, February 14th. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the 9 great royal cities made an announcement at the same time. Royal City Announcement. In order to divert players and explore the mysterious underworld, a satellite city is specially opened. Anyone who obtains a satellite city token and inserts it into the conference hall of the mayor's mansion of the satellite city will automatically obtain the right to defend the satellite city. After 24 hours, other guilds of the royal city can lead troops to attack the satellite city. If the defending guild successfully holds out for 24 hours, it will obtain the right to defend forever. If the attacking guild shatters the stone tablet of the satellite city, it will also obtain the right to defend forever. Along with the royal city announcement, a dazzling golden light flashed on the outskirts of the 9 royal cities at the same time. Like a mushroom cloud from a nuclear explosion, the golden light shot up into the sky. Even 1,000 miles away it could be seen clearly. When the golden light dissipated, 9 brand new cities stood in the wilderness. Each city was 10 miles long and wide. Whether it was the city walls or the city buildings, they were almost a simplified version of the various royal cities. Even so, it was a majestic city. Countless lord players drooled at the sight of it. Many of the cities in the wilderness couldn't meet the standards of this satellite city. Just this majestic city was worth tens of millions of gold coins. It was no wonder countless guilds went crazy for it. Of course, according to the information revealed by Gaia, the guild that guarded the satellite city only had the right to use and lease the city. It did not have ownership or mortgage rights. To put it bluntly, the satellite city's guild was equivalent to a city manager. It was in charge of the satellite city's operations and had the right to rent out shops and properties in the city, as well as collect taxes to obtain legal income. Furthermore, half of the city's income had to be handed over to the corresponding royal city's imperial court. Of course, the royal city would not take the income for free. It had the obligation to protect the satellite city's safety. If the Lord of the Wilderness sent troops to attack the satellite city, it was equivalent to attacking the royal city. As such, it greatly increased the satellite city's safety. Otherwise, faced with a fat piece of meat like the satellite city, there was no guarantee that the lords would take the risk and send troops to attack. If that was the case, the Guardian Guild would definitely not be able to defend it. Speaking of which, as the satellite city's guild's right to defend was permanent, and it was already Gaia's 4th year, there was not much difference whether the Guardian Guild had ownership of the satellite city or not. There were 2 reasons for Gaia's rules. First, as the guild did not have ownership of the satellite city, when Gaia calculated the player's game assets after the game ended, the satellite city would not be included in the calculation. This was normal. If the guild obtained such a city through a major battle, ignoring the dissatisfaction of other players, it would be unfair to the Lord players. Which Lord's city wasn't built from scratch and slowly built from scratch. Second, as the guild did not have ownership or mortgage rights to the satellite city, the Guardian Guild could not transfer the satellite city, nor could they use the satellite city as a mortgage to obtain loans. This was to prevent players from taking advantage of loopholes. As the battle for the satellite city had not begun, Gaia did not disclose the underworld entrance for the time being. It was unknown if it would be a teleportation portal or a physical entrance. If it was a physical entrance, would there be a situation where the underworld monsters would counterattack the satellite city? There was also the issue of access to the underworld entrance that was not disclosed. Did it require the Guardian Guild's permission, or could all players from the royal city enter? There was also the issue of whether there was a fee. Everything would only be revealed after the dust had settled in the battle for the satellite town. According to the information disclosed in the announcement, the entire battle for the satellite city could be divided into 2 stages. The first stage was to find the satellite city token and break through the various obstacles to insert the token into the satellite city's Castellan Manors meeting hall, activating the satellite city and temporarily becoming the city's master. After activating the city, non-Guardian Guild players would be teleported out of the city by Gaia. The Guardian Guild would have a day to prepare and organize the city's defenses. At the same time, a certain number of NPC troops would spawn in the city to assist in the defense. Of course, there would not be too many NPC troops. The main force would be the Guardian Guild players. Following that, it would be the second stage, which was the guild battle stage. One guild would defend, and the remaining guilds would attack. The guilds that lost in the first stage had already lost the initiative. Therefore, in the second stage, they would attack the satellite city at all costs, fighting for their last chance of survival. At this time, strategy was important. For the Guardian Guild, it was to restrain their allies as much as possible, preventing them from participating in the siege, so as to reduce the pressure on the defense. As for getting allies to help defend the city, Gaia would not allow it. For the sieging guilds, it was even more complicated. Not only did they have to contact the other guilds to attack the city, but they also had to be wary of each other, or come to a tacit understanding ahead of time, or even sign an agreement. This was because even if they conquered the satellite city, there was only one guild that could ultimately shatter the city's stone monument. Faced with such a huge temptation, no one knew what would happen until the very last moment. At the same time, due to the uncertainty of the first stage, the siege of the 9 capital cities would not be synchronized. For this, Gaia would seal off all the teleportation arrays in the capital cities before the 9 capital cities, satellite cities, were established as Guardian Guild. In this battle, unaffiliated players without guilds had no right to participate. They were basically marginal characters. Gaia did not even allow unaffiliated players to participate in the second stage of the siege. This was also to control the variables as much as possible. Gaia did not want the overall standard of wilderness players to regress because of the intense battles. Right at this moment, another announcement sounded. Royal City announcement. The Satellite City token will be randomly refreshed to a player in the Royal City. The token cannot be placed in a storage bag. It will be dropped upon death. The system will automatically refresh the token's coordinates every 10 minutes. With that, the most tragic battle of the first year officially began. Chapter 8:19. It would drop upon death, and the coordinates would be updated at any time. Gaia's setting of the Satellite City token drop mechanism vividly reflected the cruelty of the war. With the second announcement from the capital, 9 lucky ones immediately appeared from the 9 great capital cities. They stared at the Satellite City token that suddenly appeared in their hands in a daze. However, the lucky ones were not really lucky. What followed was a massacre. Once the killing started, it would never stop. Some people died under the enemy's sword the moment they obtained the token. Others hid in fear, but ultimately, they could not escape their doom. There were also those who were extremely confident, believing that they were fated, but they did not expect it to be a dream. The moment the Satellite City token appeared, it would constantly circulate in the hands of different people. This was no treasure token, it was a death warrant. Whoever had it would be unlucky. What was even worse was that the token could not be traded to others. It could not even be thrown away. It was like a dogskin plaster. Either it was inserted into the city Lord Manor's meeting hall, or it would wait for the next person to take it. Gaia had set it up in such a way to prevent guilds from playing any tricks. The token's coordinates would be refreshed every 10 minutes. If it was cleverly designed, it was possible to directly transfer the token to the satellite city. Secondly, it was to prevent any bastard from throwing the token into a river, a smelly ditch, or even off a cliff, whether it was to avoid trouble or out of some kind of dark intention. There were even some special terrains that did not appear. That would become a farce. In the beginning, the token was only in the hands of a few people. The massacre was limited to a dozen people, a few dozen people, and at most 100. When the token landed in the hands of a large or medium-sized guild, it would lead to a chaotic war between the guild. The number of people killed was like a rolling snowball, growing bigger and bigger. More and more players were embroiled in this massacre. Some people had no choice but to do it, while others took the initiative to fight. Most of them were fighting for the guild's interests. The satellite city was just too tempting, so much so that the players gradually lost their rationality. Even some medium-sized guilds were unwilling to give up the token despite knowing that they did not have the strength to protect it. If we don't give it a try, how do we know it's impossible? Who knows, we might succeed. The players held onto a wishful thinking. Without the guild leader's encouragement, the members took the initiative to fight. The slaughter spread, and the killing intent gathered, gradually affecting the players' minds. As time passed, the battlefield gradually moved from the capital to the outskirts, slowly moving in the direction of the satellite town. At the end of the battle, some players' eyes were bloodshot. Originally, the only reason for the players to kill each other was to fight for the satellite town token. But in the end, because of the slaughter, countless karma was sown out of thin air. The purpose of the massacre was gradually expanding. His brother was killed, so he had to take revenge, right? How could he bear it when his lover was killed? A guild member had been killed. Shouldn't they seek revenge? All sorts of karma entangled with each other. Just as one was settled, more killing karma was born. It was endless. The desire to kill among the players had never been as exuberant as it was today. Like adding oil to a raging fire, the more it burned, the more the players' rationality and brains were burned away. The only thing left in their eyes was slaughter. The desire to kill hidden in the depths of every player's heart, this invisible beast seemed to have been completely released. All of its shackles were removed, and it became unbridled. Perhaps this was also one of the charms of the game. Killing in the game didn't require legal responsibility, especially during the system's mission period. There was no red mark, and the capital's constables wouldn't come looking for trouble. There was no need to go to jail. The players were even more unbridled when they killed each other. For some PK fanatics, this was simply a feast of slaughter. However, no matter how the satellite town token was passed around, it would eventually return to the hands of the large guilds because only they had the strength to protect the token. On this day, the wilderness wasn't the main character. The 9 great capitals were the focus of the whole world. After the announcement from the capital, Ouyang Shuo didn't go anywhere. He just sat in his study, constantly paying attention to the developments of the battle for the satellite towns. The 9 great capitals all opened posts on the forums, tracking and reporting in real time. He sat there for the whole morning, but there was still no result. Until after 3 in the afternoon, the 9 tokens had basically all fallen into the hands of the major guild. Next was a battle to break out of the encirclement. The guilds would mobilize all their forces and escort them all the way to the satellite towns. The other guilds naturally wouldn't let this go. The players' calculations were very shrewd. Even if they couldn't stop the target guild from sending the token to the satellite towns, they would still peel off a layer of skin from the other party. In the following siege battle, they would weaken the defending guild's strength. The target guild basically had to walk through mountains of corpses and seas of blood to get there. The major guilds weren't stupid. They wouldn't easily waste their strength on the first day. At this time, the role of allies was shown. The allies protected the outer circle while the people from the major guilds were in the inner circle. The deception and deceit in the process were simply too many to count. The later it got, the more intense the fighting became. The players' hearts were like a mirror. At night, everything was pitch black, and things would be difficult. The target guild could arrange for people to sneak through the human wall and enter the satellite towns. Therefore, by evening, the first stage of the competition between the 9 major guilds was basically concluded. Based on the current situation, there weren't any dark horses in the 9 great capitals. The competition in some of the king cities was strangely mild. This included the Yan-Huang alliances Xiangyang and Chang'an cities. The 18 steeds of Swallow and Cloud and the embroidered uniform guard didn't meet with any obstacles. The number of allies that assisted the 2 major guilds during the day was unexpectedly many. No one would have thought that the 2 major guilds would have such strong rallying power. Based on the current situation, it was almost certain that the 2 guilds would take down Satellite Town in the end. Apart from that, Quanzhou's Flowing Light Pavilion, Chengdu's Laojun Temple, and Luoyang's Tingyu Tower, these 3 allied guilds of Shanghai City were also progressing smoothly and didn't meet with too many obstacles. Ouyang Shuo could tell that there was something fishy going on. On the contrary, the 2 strongest guilds in the China server, Xianyang's Baleful Blood Mercenaries and Jianye's Snow Rose Mercenaries, met with unimaginable resistance. Some of the allies suddenly turned against each other and joined the encirclement. Fortunately, the 2 major guilds were strong and prepared, so the situation was still under control. The most uncomfortable one was the Breeze Pavilion in Dali. Last night, Pavilion Master Bright Moon Illuminates the River was captured, which affected the guild's morale. What was worse was that more than 70% of the guilds in Dali participated in the encirclement against Cool Breeze Pavilion. Although the Breeze Pavilion had protected the token of the satellite town, they had suffered heavy losses. Based on the number of casualties, it would be hard for Cool Breeze Pavilion to defend the satellite towns. The capital was not peaceful either. It wasn't strange that crisscrossing Sword Aura and Star Alliance teamed up to fight against Shadow Alliance and Dream House. What was strange was that there were many guilds that supported the former. The 2 sides were originally evenly matched, but the balance was heavily tilted in favor of crisscrossing Sword Aura. The satellite town's token of the capital was currently in the hands of crisscrossing Sword Aura. Night fell, and the first phase of the battle for the satellite towns of the 9 great royal cities was over. The 9 major guilds activated the satellite towns one by one. Only then did the crowd gradually disperse. The forum was still very lively, and everyone was discussing the battle during the day. Even if they weren't the main characters, the players were still excited. This kind of group PvP between players was different from a battle between a territory's army. Since both sides were players, it was only natural that it would be more cruel and exciting. The players' adrenaline levels skyrocketed. In reality, everyone was living in a peaceful era, so how could they have the chance to participate in such a hot-blooded battle? The players who had a new lease on life used 4 words to describe the battle during the day: satisfying. In this chaotic battle, a new batch of superstars emerged. They were brave and fierce in PvP, killing their enemies like flies, and leading their troops on the battlefield. They were invincible, decisive, and had the demeanor of ancient generals. After the battle, these superstars were all put in important positions by their guilds, and received promotions and reward. They instantly became the stars of the adventurer players, and were worshipped by countless players. There were even rumors that some leaders of guilds had their eyes on these superstars and wanted to recruit them as valiant generals. As soon as this news came out, the fame of the superstars rose to an even higher level. Ouyang Shuo felt that there was an invisible hand pushing and packaging this batch of supernovas behind the scenes. The attentive Ouyang Shuo realized that these so-called superstars were basically all from the Yen-Huang Alliance faction. Using this opportunity to promote a group of star players, this was to further increase the fame of the Yen-Huang Alliance. Among these supernovas were there disciples of those secret families. They used this opportunity to become famous, and even though they started later, they arrived first. What a brilliant move! Ouyang Shuo was more and more impressed by his opponents. They weren't simple at all. Heroes were sought after and enjoyed the limelight, but the countless players who died and reincarnated were ignored. They were like a group of losers who could only silently watch the rise of the superstars, becoming stepping stones for them. The wilderness was just this cruel to the point where there wasn't a trace of humanity. Some people were discouraged and decided to become life profession players, while others were unwilling to give up and decided to fight again. To the latter, the dojos that were opened in the capital seemed to be a good choice. They were starting from zero and walking on a different path of development. Therefore, this chaotic battle between guilds unexpectedly caused the dojos to become popular. In less than an hour, all sorts of statistics were calculated on the forums. When the players saw this, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. According to incomplete statistics, in just one day, the number of people who died in the 9 great capital cities exceeded 1 million. One had to know that the people who died this time were all combat profession players in their prime. With this calculation, the ratio was very shocking. It was equivalent to 1 out of 20. Chapter 8:20. In addition to the statistics, the forum was also discussing the battle situation in the 9 king cities during the day. The outsiders were getting more and more confused about the battle for the satellite cities. The 18 steeds of Yen and Yun and the embroidered uniform guards of the Yen-Huang Alliance were having an easy time, while the Snow Death Rose mercenary group and the Breeze Pavilion of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas were having a hard time. Some people said that the Yen-Huang Alliance had the upper hand. However, it could be said that the Yen-Huang Alliance was attacking the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. But the Flowing Light Pavilion, Laojun Temple, and Pavilion of the Rain were progressing smoothly. The situation was confusing, and no one could see through it. How could the players know that these 3 guilds had quietly changed sides? As such, in reality, the Yen-Huang Alliance had the upper hand in this battle for the satellite city. The Alliance of Mountains and Seas was in danger. Ouyang Shuo saw this and knew what was going on. The Tingyu Pavilion's Thunder Sword Chi still had some conscience. At least he gave Ouyang Shua a warning and said goodbye. However, the Laojun Templeist Taoist priest Green Bull and the Flowing Light Pavilionist Elder June were bastards. They secretly changed sides without saying a word. I'll settle this score with you. Ouyang Shua's eyes flashed with coldness. February 25th, a day of rest. The guilds that were qualified to defend the 9 king cities were the busiest on this day. They had to defend the satellite cities and prepare for tomorrow's siege. They also had to strengthen their allies and form alliances. Especially the Baleful Blood Mercenary Group, the Snow Death Rose Mercenary Group, and Breeze Pavilion. They had to make the last connection on this day. The Silver Hand was indeed powerful, but it was not powerful enough to cover the sky. The reason why the Yen-Huang Alliance's camp progressed smoothly in the battle for the satellite cities yesterday was that the Silver Hand, controlled more than 10 large guilds, suddenly changed sides. Their temporary change became the key factor that changed the balance of power. Now it all depended on who was more skilled. The Breeze Pavilion was undoubtedly pitiful. The Pavilion Master was locked in the Ministry of Justice's prison at the crucial moment, which made their allies suspicious. The strategy of the Silver Hand was undoubtedly brilliant. In the first stage, they were not in a hurry to show up and snatch the token of the Dali Royal City's satellite city. That was because none of the dozen large guilds controlled by the Silver Hand had the confidence to resist the siege of the Breeze Pavilion and its allies in the second stage of the siege. So they played a trick. In the first phase, he would let the Breeze Pavilion be the target. In the second phase, he would execute the Wolf Pack strategy and take down the Breeze Pavilion. Even though the Breeze Pavilion knew the enemy's plan, they had to follow the script. As the largest guild in the capital of Dali and one of the top 10 guilds in the China region, the Breeze Pavilion had its own pride. Some things had to be fought for and resisted. By 5 or 6 p.m., the 24-hour cooldown was over. One after another, guilds from the 9 king cities launched probing attacks on the satellite cities to find out the truth. Of course, this was just the appetizer. It only took an hour. By the time night fell, the outside of Satellite Town was already dotted with flames. The guilds who were interested had long since set up camp outside the satellite city, seizing advantageous attacking positions and waiting for tomorrow's battle. The next morning, when the sun had just risen, a large number of attacking guilds didn't give the defending guilds any time to rest and immediately began to attack the city. They weren't an army, so they didn't pay attention to obedience and didn't have any tactic. Their only strategy was to overwhelm the satellite city with their numbers. Therefore, they had to race against time. Ouyang Shua sat peacefully in Shanghai City, and he already had a basic plan for the battle for the satellite cities. It seemed that the decline of the League of Mountains and Seas Guild Alliance was a fait accompli. Except for the Flowing Light Pavilion, the Laojun Temple, and the Tingyu Tower, which had joined the Yen-Huang Alliance, the Dream Pavilion and the Shadow Alliance in the capital probably couldn't beat the unstoppable Sword Aura. What was worse was that the Breeze Pavilion, the core ally of Shanghai City, probably couldn't protect the satellite city. What Ouyang Shua was most concerned about was whether the Snow Rose mercenary group could survive this wave. If the Snow Death Rose fell as well, then Alliance of Mountains and Seas, Guild Alliance, would fall as well. Hopefully, the equipment he sent over last night would be able to save the day. Ouyang Shua didn't do nothing these 2 days. He had already ordered the Black Snake Guards that hadn't left the China region to mobilize all the spies in the capital, Jianye, Dali, and even Xianyang. They were either to create chaos and division in the guilds controlled by the Silver Hand or to build bridges in the neutral guild. The resistance that the Baleful Blood mercenary group encountered in the first stage made Ouyang Shua realize that the strongest guild in China region hadn't been taken down by the Silver Hand yet. Ouyang Shua naturally wanted to help if he could. When the traditional allies were falling, Ouyang Shua didn't want to let go of any opportunity to form an alliance. In short, Ouyang Shua had done everything he could. He even wanted to send a batch of equipment to the Breeze Pavilion, but the teleportation array in the capital was closed by Gaia, so Ouyang Shua couldn't do anything. At this point, they could only rely on themselves. Ouyang Shua, the leader of the alliance, had to consider how to deal with the post-war situation. Judging from the behavior of Di Chen and the others, the Silver Hand was definitely a ruthless existence. Since they had instigated the Flowing Light Pavilion and the other guilds to defect, they would not be satisfied with just taking down the satellite town. After the war, they would definitely have other plans. Ouyang Shua first thought of the Four Seas Bank. The rain-savoring building owned 5% of the shares of the Bank of the Four Seas, while the Liuguang Pavilion and the Laojun Temple each owned 3% of the shares. The three together had 11% of the shares, which was already a force that could not be ignored. Withdrawing from the Four Seas Bank and going into the arms of Huitong Bank was almost a foreseeable thing. What was even more vicious was that they would use this as an opportunity to attack the Four Seas Bank's business in the Nine King City. The Bank of the Four Seas was an important tool for Ouyang Shua to exert his influence on the grassroots players. It was also a major financial pillar of the territory. Ouyang Shua would never allow it to be destroyed by the Silver Hand. Thinking up to here, Ouyang Shua immediately summoned the head shopkeeper of the Four Seas Bank, Meng Jida. Coincidentally, Ouyang Shua and the other ministers were discussing the structure of the dynasty, and the Bank of the Four Seas also needed to make some adjustments. The two matters could be discussed together. As for the specific situation of the battle for the satellite town, Ouyang Shua was already not in the mood to pay attention to it. Half an hour later, Meng Jida hurried over. The business of the Bank of the Four Seas was closely related to the guild. Meng Jida had a keen sense of smell, and naturally had been paying attention to the progress of the battle for the satellite town. Hearing that Jun Shang had summoned him, his heart skipped a beat. Meng Jida had a hunch that what Jun Shang wanted to talk to him was related to the current battle royale. After sitting down, he did not expect Jun Shang to talk about another matter. Ouyang Shua said, "Jida, when the territory is established, we need to form a cabinet. Have you heard about this?" "I have." Ouyang Shua nodded and said, "After the country is established, in principle, the general administration of finance will be promoted to the finance department. Only one thing, the Bank of the Four Seas will be separated from the future finance department. It will be directly under the cabinet and run parallel to the finance department." This, Meng Jida did not know how to respond. Meng Jida was naturally happy that the Bank of the Four Seas was upgraded and no longer restricted by the finance department. But at the moment, the Bank of the Four Seas was still under the leadership of the General Administration of Finance, and Fan Li was still his direct superior. Therefore, Meng Jida really could not comment on this matter, and it was better to remain silent. Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "Since I have informed you in advance, there is nothing to be afraid of. Upgrading the Bank of the Four Seas is not an expansion of power, but because of the needs of the future dynasty. In the future, the Bank of the Four Seas will need to take on the related functions of the central bank. The burden on your shoulders is not easy. As the leader of the Federation's banking industry, you should be clearer than me about the understanding and position of the central bank, right?" In reality, the central bank was an institution established by the government. It was responsible for controlling the country's money supply, credit conditions, and supervising the financial system, especially commercial banks and other savings institutions. The responsibilities of the central bank included the unified issuance of money, centralized custody of commercial banks' reserves, acting as the national treasury, acting as an agent for the issuance of government bonds, managing foreign exchange, and so on. Another point was that the central bank was not for profit, but to serve the country's macroeconomic goals. Therefore, Ouyang Shua said that the Bank of the Four Seas only took on part of the responsibilities of the central bank. In the future, the Bank of the Four Seas would need to operate globally, and could not be considered as a pure central bank. Meng Zhida naturally understood and said, "I understand." Ouyang Shuo stopped there and then talked about the possibility of Tingyu Tower and the other guilds withdrawing their investment. If they withdraw their investment, do we have any countermeasure? Ouyang Shuo asked. Meng Zhida listened and did not panic. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, ruler. When the guilds invested, they all signed a legally binding agreement. According to the breach of contract clause, if the shareholders unilaterally withdraw their investment, the Bank of the Four Seas has the right to deduct half of the share capital as a penalty." Ouyang Shuo smiled. That is indeed enough for them to suffer. When the guilds invested, each share was valued at 200,000 gold coins. The three big guilds had 11% of the shares. If half of the share capital was deducted, they would have to pay a total of 1,100,000 gold coins as a penalty. To the guilds, this was not a small sum. Meng Zhida continued, other than the share capital, if they withdraw the savings deposited in the Bank of the Four Seas. According to the agreement, as a shareholder, the funds deposited in the Bank of the Four Seas are calculated according to a fixed period of 3 years. If they withdraw it before the deadline, they will not get a single cent of interest. Ouyang Shuo nodded. He was clear about this. During the auction last year, Bloody Romance and Xiesiun withdrew 2 sums of money, but they did not get a single copper coin of interest. This was equivalent to saying that Tingyu Tower and the other guilds had deposited a large sum of money in the Bank of the Four Seas and let the Bank of the Four Seas use it for a year without getting any return on their investment. If inflation was taken into account, they would even lose money. Chapter 821. Ouyang Shuo was still worried and asked Meng Zhida, "If Tingyu Tower and the other guilds withdraw their savings funds at the same time, will there be an impact on the Bank of the Four Seas business?" Meng Zhida said, "There will definitely be some impact, but it doesn't matter much. After a year of development, the Bank of the Four Seas has a very rich source of savings and no longer relies on large amounts of savings. What if there are more than 100 large and medium-sized guilds withdrawing their savings funds at the same time?" Ouyang Shuo had a taste of the influence of the Silver Hand. Since Silver Hand could influence these guilds, they could naturally make them withdraw their funds. When Meng Zhida heard this, his expression turned solemn. He said, "If that's the case, the Bank of the Four Seas will definitely experience a period of turmoil. If we take precautions in advance, it shouldn't hurt our foundation." Ouyang Shuo nodded his head, feeling slightly more at ease. In the future, the Bank of the Four Seas will focus on individual investors. Only by establishing a solid foundation among the grassroots will we be able to remain invincible. My lord is right. It was time for the Bank of the Four Seas to change. Ouyang Shuo waved his hand and said, "Go and make preparations. Make a contingency plan. I reckon that when the battle for the satellite cities is settled, they will take action." "Understood. Your humble servant will take his leave." Meng Zhida turned and left. Ouyang Shuo continued to stay in the study, waiting for the final outcome of the battle for the satellite cities. February 26, 3 in the afternoon. At this point in the siege war, the situation was gradually becoming clear. The huge sacrifice finally woke up the small and medium-sized guilds. Looking around, there were only a few brothers left. It was truly chilling. After the players died, the dropped equipment was scattered at the foot of the city walls. Many of the equipment were not picked up in time and were all taken away by Gaia. It made the players who died cry. The only ones still fighting in the 9 king cities were Dali, Jianye, and Xianyang. Even the capital's Single Dream Brothel and Shadow Alliance had given up after paying a heavy price. At around 4 in the afternoon, Silver Hand finally suffered a setback. Under heavy siege, Jianye's Snow Morning Rose mercenary group and Xianyang's Baleful Blood mercenary group still stood firm, allowing Silver Hand to see what a giant's foundation was. In desperation, Silver Hand could only give up. They had no choice but to give up. Even if the leaders of the guilds they controlled were willing to attack, their subordinates wouldn't be willing to die for nothing. The leader of a guild in the game, especially in a game like Earth on Lu, that involved real interests, couldn't decide the life and death of a guild member with a single word. No one was a fool. The only one that was still struggling was the Breeze Pavilion in Dali. In the first phase of the war, the Breeze Pavilion had already suffered heavy losses, and now they were betrayed by their allies, which made their situation even worse. The attacking guilds saw hope and gritted their teeth to continue fighting. The Breeze Pavilion was about to collapse. When Ouyang Shua saw this, his expression became gloomy. There were many things that even he was powerless to change. At 6:15, a Royal City announcement sounded. Royal City announcement. Congratulations to Xiao Nianying for leading the Xiao Alliance to break through the satellite city guarded by the Breeze Pavilion, obtaining the right to permanently guard the satellite city of Dali Royal City. Congratulations, player. When the announcement came out, the world was in an uproar. The originally inconspicuous guild, a Xiao Alliance, leaped to fame and became the biggest dark horse in the battle for the satellite city, becoming famous in the wilderness. At this point, the Silver Hand had basically achieved its goal of dismembering the League of Mountains and Seas Guild Alliance. Among the guild alliances that originally had absolute dominance in the China region, only the Snow Death Rose was left to maintain their position as the overlord of the royal city. Even if the Baleful Blood mercenary group was included, there were only 2 guilds left. What about the Silver Hand? 7 out of 9, it could be said to be in the limelight. By evening, the 9 great royal cities' satellite city guardian guilds had all settled, and there were no more surprises. Gaia was also efficient, immediately announcing the operating rules of the satellite city and the opening rules of the entrance to the underground world. According to the rules, although the guardian guilds had the right to use the satellite city, they had no right to keep players out. In other words, players could freely enter and exit the satellite city. However, Gaia didn't care if they could rent houses and shops in the city. The guardian guilds could use this to further strengthen their alliance and solidify their position as the overlord of the royal city. The entrance to the underground world was a physical entrance, located in the central square. Through a staircase that led downwards, one could enter the mysterious underground world. The entrance was open to all players, and the guardian guilds had no right to stop them. Gaia's rules were to prevent the guardian guilds from monopolizing the underground world and infringing on the interests of ordinary players. This was not in line with the fairness of the game, nor was it in line with the original intent of the game. The entrance to the underground world was a two-way street. One of the important duties of the guardian guilds was to guard the entrance and prevent the creatures of the underground world from charging into the satellite city. February 27th, Shanghai City. Under Ouyang Shua's invitation, Shadow Alliance's Alliance Master, Shadow Fox, Dreamless Brothel's Tower Master, Dream Cloud's Devourer, as well as Breeze Pavilion's Tower Master, Bright Moon Illuminates the River, who had just been released by the Ministry of Justice, gathered in Shanghai City. Having just lost the satellite city, the trio were rather depressed. Ouyang Shua's invitation to the trio was meant to appease them. He said, "If I'm not wrong, when a lord city is promoted to a capital city, it will likely open similar satellite city." Really? The trio's eyes lit up. Ouyang Shua said, "A capital city is on the same level as a system's royal city. Gaia won't favor one over the other. Shanghai City will reach the population limit of 2 million this week and can apply to be promoted to a capital city. If you still trust me as the Alliance Master, please don't be impatient and bear with it for now. Once Shanghai City is promoted to a capital city, everything will be clear. Even if the capital city doesn't open the satellite city, Shanghai City will have the strength to take down a royal city in the future." Bright Moon Illuminates the River's eyes lit up when he heard that. That's right. Those despicable people who hide in the shadows can flaunt their might for a while. But in the wilderness, strength speaks louder. Ignoring the distant future, if Shanghai City were to send troops to take down Dali County, the satellite city would naturally be regained. With this in mind, Bright Moon illuminates the river's emotions immediately calmed down. He never doubted that Shanghai City had the strength to take down Dali. It was just a matter of how much Shanghai City was willing to sacrifice. Hope reignited in Jinghu and Dream Cloud's devourer. They had been defeated by rampaging Sword Qi. Only because they were lacking in strength. It had nothing to do with Shanghai City. On the contrary, if not for the equipment Shanghai City sold them and the information they provided, they would have lost even more miserably. They could not ask for more from their alliance master, Ouyang Shuo. But even under such circumstances, Ouyang Shuo still made such a promise. It was truly touching. Jinghu said, "Don't worry, we can wait. While the guild is a little unstable right now, we can use this opportunity to clean up our internal affairs. We can slim down and travel with light equipment." His words were filled with respect for Ouyang Shuo. Dream Cloud's devourer nodded firmly as well. They finally understood what it meant to see a friend in need. With an alliance master like this, even if we lose, we won't feel wronged. The four of them chatted for a while longer before going their separate ways. From this day onwards, the relationship between Shanghai City and the three great guilds had improved. If Ouyang Shuo could fulfill his promise today, he would be able to tie the three guilds tightly together. The 9 guardian guilds had just taken down the satellite city, so they were extremely busy. The enthusiasm of the players gradually died down. They thought that the wilderness would be peaceful for a while. Who would have thought that after just one morning, a storm would appear again? At 2 in the afternoon, Tower of the Rain, Flowing Light Pavilion, and Laojun Guan made a joint statement, announcing that they would leave the Shanghai Alliance, Guild Alliance, and would join the Yan Huang Alliance. At the same time, the three guilds would also withdraw their funds from the Bank of the Four Seas and invest in the Bank of Huitong. Naturally, they would also withdraw their funds from the Bank of the Four Seas and deposit them into the Bank of Huitong. Soon after, more than 100 large and medium-sized guilds made a statement as well, collectively withdrawing their funds from the Bank of the Four Seas and depositing them into the Bank of Huitong. Once the news spread, it shook the entire wilderness. Everyone realized that a huge storm was about to arrive. Only then did the players realize that there was something fishy about the battle for the satellite city. The fact that the Yan Huang Alliance had won the battle for the satellite city was an undeniable fact. And this fact was out of everyone's expectations. Everyone thought that after the Yan Huang Alliance lost in Yunnan, their backyard was on fire, and that they would have to lay low for a long time. Who would have thought that the Yan Huang Alliance's counterattack would be so swift and fierce? If the Yan Huang Alliance has this kind of power in the guild circle, why did they wait until now to act? Are they sick in the head again? The smarter players saw through the trick. Just as everyone was confused, the Bank of the Four Seas made a statement. The statement said that the Bank of the Four Seas was a bank with a mature system, allowing all withdrawal of funds within the framework of the contract, and welcomed all new partners. The withdrawal of funds would not cause any unrest to the bank, because the bank's foundation was deeply buried in the player community. As long as the players still trusted Shanghai City, the bank's foundation would be stable. Shanghai City, which was about to be established, was the strongest backing of the Bank of the Four Seas. Finally, the statement also gave blessings to the withdrawing guilds, wishing that these guilds would be able to obtain an excellent user experience and generous investment returns in the new bank. Even an idiot could see the mockery in the statement. A year had passed, and the two banks had already determined who was stronger. The Bank of Huitong practiced what it meant to be a capitalist wolf, and with the help of the Black Snake Guards, they were covered in scandals. Some time ago, it was revealed that the Bank of Huitong had a double standard for both non-members and members of the Yen-Huang Alliance, violating the rights of the shareholders. That incident almost caused the Bank of Huitong to become the target of public criticism. Now that these guilds had suddenly switched to the Bank of Huitong, even an idiot could see that there was something fishy going on. There must be other factors behind this, and it wasn't a normal investment choice. Chapter 822. The announcement from the Bank of the Four Seas put the defected guilds, such as Tingyu Tower, in an awkward position. In addition to the players who were watching for fun, the members of these guilds also questioned the decision of their president and demanded a reasonable explanation. Given that Huitong Bank had a bad record of giving kickbacks, some players questioned whether this stupid transfer of assets was a transfer of benefits, which would harm the interests of the guild. For a moment, Tingyu Tower and the other guilds were in turmoil, which cast a shadow over the happy atmosphere of taking over the satellite town. However, after the guilds established their overlord status, the members cared more about their own interests. Seeing this, the originally affected individual investors were completely relieved, and they would not be stupid enough to invest in Huitong Bank. The announcement that Meng Jida had prepared in advance had perfectly resolved the storm of retreating into nothingness. Some of the tricks in the dark could not be put on the table after all. Taoist priest Green Bull and the other two were even more livid. Faced with the huge liquidated damages proposed by the Bank of the Four Seas, they were already furious, but they did not expect such a thing. The agreement was written in black and white, and they could not deny it, so they had to swallow their grievances. They were already annoyed enough, and with the internal turmoil, they had to take the trouble to appease the members, which made them anxious and destroyed their good mood of victory. Thunder Sound Sword felt a little remorseful. The fact that Snow Rose could protect the satellite town proved that Silverhand was not as terrible as they said. Maybe with a good operation, Tingyu Tower could take over the satellite town with their own strength. If that was the case, they would not have to be threatened by Silverhand, which was really frustrating. At this moment, Bloody Romance came out to join in the fun again. Ouyang Shua and Bloody Romance issued a joint statement that Shanghai City and Baleful Blood Mercenary Group had become iron-blooded allies, and they would advance and retreat together in the wilderness. Before, the relationship between the two was just a normal cooperation, but this time it was a complete success. With the support of Baleful Blood Mercenary Group, Shanghai Alliance's forces in the north were not completely annihilated. Don't forget that Bloody Romance had the underground world map incomplete. Baleful Blood Mercenary Group, which had the satellite town of Xianyang, was destined to be one step ahead in exploring the underground world. Baleful Blood Mercenary Group's position as the first guild in China was still unshakable. Aside from Ouyang Shua, no one knew the reason for Bloody Romance's sudden change in attitude. In the afternoon, Bloody Romance paid a surprise visit to Shanghai City. The two of them spoke for less than an hour before they came up with a joint statement. Ouyang Shua learned more secrets about Silver Hand from Bloody Romance. Towards this mysterious organization, Ouyang Shua became more and more cautious. On this day, the various dramas played out one after another, dazzling and confusing the players. Shanghai City's counterattack came to an end for the time being. Ouyang Shua had also considered whether he should let the Black Snake Guards quietly spread the news about Silver Hand to arouse the indignation of the grassroots players. After some thought, he gave up on the idea because the time was not ripe yet. Now that the Silver Hand was exposed, it was more likely that the grassroots players would not be indignant, but they would be in awe and not dare to be enemies with it. On the contrary, it would put Shanghai City in an awkward situation. Once the interests of the game were linked to the interests of the real world, there wouldn't be so many hot-blooded people who wouldn't care about the reward. In the future, the only ones who could be relied on were the players who moved to Shanghai City. This was because the two sides were bound together for good or bad. That was why Ouyang Shua said that the time was not ripe yet. The game had only been in Gaia for 4 years, so Ouyang Shua had the patience to slowly deal with a silver hand. Right now, it was more important to promote Shanghai City to a capital city as soon as possible. Gaia 4th year, March 1st, Shanghai City. In less than 5 months, Shanghai City's population reached the upper limit of 2 million. This was under the premise that the Civil Affairs Bureau strictly screened the immigrant. Otherwise, 1 million people could be gathered in 4 months. In the main hall of the Southern Border Protectorate, Ouyang Shua opened the Territory Control Panel and clicked on the application for territory promotion. A series of system notifications sounded in his ears. It was a series of basic conditions. System notification. Testing Shanghai City's application for promotion. Condition 1. Population reaches the upper limit of 2 million. Requirements met. Condition 2. All basic buildings have been completed. Requirements met. Speaking of basic buildings, one had to mention the astronomical observatory of a level 3 county city. As Luoyan had always been elusive, the Yinyang school had been in seclusion, which worried Ouyang Shu. The construction of the observatory was completed a few days ago. After Jiang Shang agreed to be the cabinet chief, he learned of Ouyang Shua's difficulties and personally contacted Luoyan. Although Luoyan was unwilling to leave the mountain, he sent 2 disciples on Jiang Shang's account. As such, the astronomical observatory was completed. Condition 3. Lord's title must be at least Duke. Requirements met. Ouyang Shua had already been promoted to Duke back when he was sailing. Half a year had passed and he had earned quite a lot of merit points. However, he was still far from becoming a king. Thankfully, the lowest requirement for establishing a country was Duke. There was no rush. Condition 4. Political, economic, cultural, and military indices must not be lower than 90 points. Technology index must not be lower than 80 points. Requirements met. Compared to a level 3 county city, the requirements for the 5 territorial indices to be promoted to a capital city were higher. Condition 5. Possess at least 3 counties. Requirements met. According to normal development, when a territory was promoted to a level 3 county city, it had to occupy at least 1 county. Otherwise, it would not be promoted. The requirement for a capital city tripled, equivalent to more than half a province. Thus, even though China was vast, when the capital city era came, the number of wilderness lords would be few and far between. When that time came, it would be a true struggle for hegemony. Condition 6. Territory's luck must be at least level 2, fortune. Requirements met. After conquering Lingnan City and Yunnan City, the Dragon of Destiny's cultivation had increased greatly. Not only that, after annexing Lingxi City, Lingxi City's luck was also devoured by the Dragon of Destiny. Thus, although the Dragon of Destiny was still a level 2 red dragon, the purple chi had already occupied 3/4 of it. It was about to completely advance to level 3 purple dragon. Fortune was the lowest requirement for a dynasty. Thus, it was included in the basic requirements for a capital city promotion. System notification. Congratulations to player who says that has no clothes. All requirements for establishing Shanghai City have been met. Do you wish to apply for promotion? Yes. System notification. Congratulations to player who says that has no clothes has successfully applied. Starting automatic matching for capital city promotion. System notification. Mission matching complete. Mission 1 Imperial Court Assessment. Accept the assessment of the Dali Imperial Court's officials. The 5 territory indexes, politics, economy, culture, technology, and military, must all be good or above. The first mission made Ouyang Shua's eyebrows twitch. As expected, he couldn't escape this calamity. Dali was currently hostile to Shanghai City. The arrest of the bright moon illuminating the river meant that the Silver Hand was also secretly instigating the relationship between the Dali Imperial Court and Shanghai City. He really didn't know what would happen if an official from the Dali Imperial Court came to assess Shanghai City. However, the 5 territory indexes were hard target. It was an important window that reflected the territory's development in various fields. It seemed like Gaia was serious this time. It wasn't willing to just use the numbers on the attribute window to make a fuss. Instead, it wanted to conduct an on-site assessment. There was nothing wrong with this. After all, it was a capital city. Ouyang Shua could understand it being a little more cautious. However, Gaia just had to choose the official from the Dali Imperial Court. This gave Ouyang Shua a headache. If it was the Chuanzhou Imperial Court, Ouyang Shua was confident that he would definitely pass the assessment. But if it was the Dali Imperial Court, it was hard to say. Given that Gaia had always upheld fairness, the officials sent by the Dali Imperial Court naturally didn't dare to abuse their authority and deliberately discredit Shanghai City. However, they could make things difficult for Shanghai City within the limits of the game's rules. Gaia couldn't do anything about it. Perhaps in Gaia's eyes, this matter itself was also a form of training. Mission 2, 36 lines. Within the promoted city, you must have all the trades in the 36 lines. The 36 lines was a general term for the main trades in China's Tang dynasty. It included the meat trade, the palace flower trade, the clothing trade, the jade trade, the jewelry trade, the silk trade, the hemp trade, the jewelry trade, the paper trade, the seafood trade, the fresh fish trade, the stationery trade, the tea trade, the bamboo and wood trade, the wine and rice trade, the ironware trade, the embroidery trade, the needlework trade, the soup trade, the medicine trade, the binding trade, the coroner trade, the witchcraft trade, the courier trade, the clay trade, the coffin trade, the leather trade, the antique trade, the sauce trade, the firewood trade, the net trade, the gauze trade, the juggling trade, the colorful trade, the drum and music trade, and the fruit trade. The 36 lines mission was clearly a comprehensive assessment of the city's social structure. If the city couldn't even gather the 36 lines, it naturally wouldn't be worthy of being promoted to a capital city. Ouyang Shua was uncertain when he saw this. As a lord, he didn't dare say that he was familiar with all the 36 lines. Some of the lines had strange names and Ouyang Shua didn't know what they did. For example, the net trade and the gauze trade left Ouyang Shua dumbfounded. He could only come down and discuss with his subordinates, hoping that there wouldn't be any problems. Mission 3: A new type of soldier. Create a new type of soldier on top of the current army's foundation. The third mission was a huge disadvantage for Shanghai City. Shanghai City had all 3 armies. They had the capture barracks, a tiger leopard cavalry, iron eagle swordsmen, armored beast cavalry, and other special soldiers. But the mission requirement was to create a new type of soldier on top of the current army's foundation. If he knew that there would be such a strange mission, Ouyang Shua would have asked Gao Shun to set up the capture barracks later. It was better to let Du Ruhui worry about this mission. System notification. The 3 promotion missions must be completed in order to be promoted. Well, he didn't even have a choice. Compared to the promotion of a county city, the promotion of a capital city wasn't simple. Chapter 8:23. On the afternoon of March 1st, in Shanghai City. In the Hall of Civil Splendor of the Southern Border Protectorate, Ouyang Shua and the First Minister of the Cabinet, Jiang Shang, as well as Xiao He, Wei Yang, Fan Li, and Du Ruhui, were having a discussion. The topic of discussion was the capital city promotion mission. Upon learning that Shanghai City was going to be promoted to a capital city, the 5 ministers were excited. Once Shanghai City was promoted to become a capital city, it would mean that the establishment of a kingdom was just around the corner. Therefore, no matter how difficult the mission was, they had to give it their all. When he left the main hall in the morning, Ouyang Shua's quest panel had given him a detailed notification of the 3 quests. The Imperial Court examination mission indicated that the examination would take place in the middle of March, but the exact date was not specified. It was very likely that the officials of the imperial court would launch a surprise attack or secretly arrive at Shanghai City to conduct an investigation first. Ouyang Shua had already instructed the Mountain Sea Guards to strengthen their surveillance of Shanghai City over the next 2 weeks. If they discovered any suspicious characters, they would immediately report it to the guards. More importantly, Ouyang Shua instructed the 4 division heads, "From now on, Shanghai City will enter a state of inspection and be prepared to be assessed at any time. In this way, we won't give the other party an opportunity to take advantage of us." Xiao He and the others were all famous officials with rich experience in battles. Naturally, they knew what the outcome would be if the Great Li Imperial Court sent officials to assess Shanghai City. Thus, they were all on guard and did not dare to be careless. "There's still some time. Let's check the loopholes first." Ouyang Shua looked at Jiang Shang and said, 5 days from now, Pavilion Elder Jiang will organize an independent evaluation team to conduct a mock evaluation of Shanghai City." Ouyang Shua, on the other hand, had brought the modern society's way of dealing with superiors' checks into the game. "Yes, sir." Since Jiang Shang had agreed to be the Prime Minister of the Cabinet, he quickly got into character. Apart from the Imperial Court's examination, the 36 lines mission also gave Ouyang Shua quite a headache. The task panel clearly stated, 36 lines, task. Degree of completion 35-36. Friendly reminder. After testing, Shanghai City currently does not have a sorcerer's movement. Please complete it as soon as possible. What does sorcerer's movement do? After asking, Ouyang Shua found out that the so-called sorcerer's walk was a sorcerer who performed divination. The mountain barbarian tribes had grand warlocks who could divine, but they were not acknowledged by Gaia. This was going to be difficult. According to the rules of the mission, from the moment the mission was accepted, Shanghai City could no longer go to Royal City to recruit talent. Thus, the witch could either rely on Shanghai City to farm refugees, or she could only search the entire territory. Ouyang Shua, on the other hand, decided to use both methods at the same time. He had already summoned all the counties to investigate and see if there were any witches. In the end, Ouyang Shua had no choice but to seek help from the recruitment hall. He wanted to see if he could find a witch during the monthly recruitment of special talents. However, the probability of this happening was too low, and there was only 1 chance per month. He really couldn't put too much hope in it. What Ouyang Shua hated the most was uncertainty. Unfortunately, whether the witch would appear or not was out of his control, which made Shanghai City's path to becoming a capital city even more difficult. As for the last mission, a new types of soldiers, Ouyang Shua had already entrusted it to Du Ruhui. After 2 hours of discussion, Ouyang Shua and the 5 ministers made a clear division of labor and made a detailed analysis of the advancement mission. What Ouyang Shua had to do next was to wait patiently. During dinner, Song Jia mentioned something to Ouyang Shua. "Wui, the movie The Beauty of the Country, has finished shooting and is currently in post-production. Wu Qingqing estimates that the movie will be released in late April at the latest." Ouyang Shua drank a mouthful of soup and said, "That's good." The Beauty of the Country would be released 2 months later than in his previous life. This was naturally due to the strong support of Shanghai Entertainment Holdings Group. "You have to cooperate during the movie's publicity." Song Jia, however, had a purpose. Ouyang Shua readily agreed. "No problem. In a few days, I will write a commentator article on the gaming and entertainment industry for the Daily News, and mention this movie in it." Song Jia smiled and said, "That's great. Once you open your mouth, it's better than any publicity." Song Jia's words weren't flattery, but the truth. Ouyang Shua, the strongest lord in the wilderness, had a far-sighted vision. This was a widely recognized fact in the wilderness. It was easy to imagine what kind of heated discussion the article he wrote would cause in the wilderness. Perhaps this would open the curtains to the explosion of the entertainment industry. Shanghai Entertainment Holdings Group, which had long been prepared, took this opportunity to set sail. Song Jia then said, "One more thing. The movie Hua Tsubing is also in the midst of filming. If it's fast, it should be released in early June." A few days ago, the Imperial Guards had already returned to Shanghai City to rest and reorganize, giving the production team a great deal of convenience. Ouyang Shua nodded. He was also looking forward to seeing if these two movies would shine even more brilliantly than in his previous life under the influence of someone who had been reborn. "Oh right," Song Jia suddenly said excitedly. "Auntie sent me a letter this morning saying that she's preparing to open the Kunlun instance tomorrow. She wants me to rush to Janya first thing in the morning." The Kunlun instance was a wuxia instance. Xiexiyun had won it at the global auction for the high price of 850,000 gold coins. Ouyang Shua had invested 200,000 gold coins in it to get a spot for Song Jia. Seeing his wife's excited expression, Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "Then go. I will have Tianqi arrange for people to secretly protect you. After all, it's the first wuxia instance. It should be very interesting." "I think so too." Song Jia was full of anticipation. After learning about the instance, she had specially crammed on the internet to read the original work. She had read it from beginning to end 4 times. Not to mention anything else, just the martial arts secret manuals and divine weapons in the novels were enough to make people salivate with desire. The husband and wife talked as they finished their dinner. "Let's not talk about this for now." March 2, Jiangnan Province, Zhoushan Port. At about 4 p.m., a sail-powered battleship with the Statue of Liberty hanging over it slowly docked at the port. It was the battleship from Freedom City that had just left Japan. On the dock, Di Chen, Lord Chunshin, Xiongba Wolf Warrior, Military Kill Ripper, and Wandering Huan were all present. The others were quite excited. Only Wandering Huan had a somewhat complicated expression. Before the battle for the satellite town, Wandering Huan had only found out that behind the families of Xiongba and the others was a mysterious organization called the Silver Hand. This had made him quite shocked. Under Xiongba's persuasion, Wandering Huan finally accepted the Silver Secret Order, but he felt uneasy. According to the style of the Silver Hand, everything was done to protect the interests of the aristocratic families. If in the future national war, the national interests and the interests of the Silver Hand conflicted, what choice would Di Chen and the others make? At the thought of this, Wandering Huan shuddered a little. Cooperating with Di Chen and the others was tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin, which made Wandering Huan tremble with fear. It was just that he had already boarded the warship of the Yan-Huang Alliance, and could no longer get off. During the battle for the satellite town, Wandering Huan had an intuitive understanding of the power of the Silver Hand. Now that the First Lord of the United States had sent the core technology from thousands of miles away, he was even more surprised. Just as Wandering Huan was in a daze, the sail-powered battleship had stopped, and a ladder was lowered from the battleship. 2 Americans, 1 civil and 1 military, walked in the front, followed by a group of soldiers armed with guns. When Di Chen and the others saw them, they greeted them with a smile. What followed was naturally a welcoming dinner, and then the transaction that had been booked was carried out. The moment Di Chen received the 3 technical manuals from the clerk of the Free City, his hands trembled a little. With these 3 treasures, the technological advantage of Shanghai City would be gone. In addition, Di Chen had already thought about using these 3 things to write a good article, and then take Shanghai City down a notch. The next morning, the battleship set off and left. Di Chen and the others did not leave. Although they drank with the 2 Americans yesterday, and almost didn't sleep for the whole night, they were all in high spirits, and simply held a temporary alliance meeting in Overlord City. In addition to discussing how to set up a trap for Shanghai City, there was another agenda, which was about instigating the dragon-seeking acupoints. Xiongba admitted that he had made decisive progress. The big gift sent by Jack was a fatal blow to Xiongba. Xiongba looked around and said, "The old fox is very stingy, and only authorized the weaving machine manufacturing technology to the dragon-seeking acupoints. The rest of the steam engine, warship, and other technologies were all blocked. This made the dragon-seeking acupoints very dissatisfied, and they held a grudge. Think about it, if we use these 3 technical authorizations as bargaining chips, do we still have to worry about that kid not obediently giving in?" Zhang Lang was honest and asked in confusion, "But once these 3 technologies are authorized in our territories, it will break through the limit of 5 technical authorizations. This technology will naturally be popularized in the China region." Xiongba smiled, and there was indescribable slyness in his smile. "So, we can delay the internal authorization of the technology. When the dragon-seeking acupoints is reversed, it won't be too late to authorize the internal authorization. As long as both sides sign the agreement in black and white, even if the dragon-seeking acupoints finds out that they have been tricked, there is no way out." Wandering, who was at the side, heard this and felt a faint chill in his heart. These aristocratic children were indeed experts in playing trick. If they really did this, they would be forcing the dragon-seeking acupoints to the road of death. Thinking about it, Wandering felt sad for the dragon-seeking acupoints. Why bother? You fell out with Shanghai City because of a small matter. Now you have built a relationship with the Yen-Huang Alliance. But they are digging a hole for you. It really is one wrong step, and you will fall into a bottomless abyss. Wandering, however, secretly warned himself in his heart that he could not do the next dragon-seeking acupoints. This is a good idea. Lord Chunshan and the rest agreed. They were not very interested in counteracting the dragon-seeking acupoints, and it was Xiongba who was actively working on it. But if they could use this kind of getting something for nothing method to take down the dragon-seeking acupoints, they naturally would not reject it. At the very least, it would be good to disgust their mortal enemy. Xiongba was overjoyed and said, "Then it's settled. Don't worry, I will get it done as soon as possible." Chapter 824. 5th of March, Overlord City. In a secret room of the City Lord's mansion, Xiongba and dragon-searching acupoint were negotiating. They chose to negotiate in Overlord City to avoid Shanghai City's eyes. 2 days ago, the confidants of both sides had held 4 rounds of secret negotiations and basically finalized the cooperation. The two were now talking face to face to make the final confirmation. Dragon-searching acupoint spoke first. "After leaving Shanghai Alliance and joining Yen-Huang Alliance, I want the same treatment and status as Wandering Huan. As the only civilian player lord in Yen-Huang Alliance, Wandering Huan had become the benchmark for other grassroots lords to work with Yen-Huang Alliance. If Wandering Huan knew about this, what would he think? Okay." Xiongba nodded in agreement. Dragon-searching acupoint continued. "If the matter is exposed and Shanghai City sends troops to attack Dragon-searching City, you have the obligation to send troops to help. No excuses are allowed. This is also included in the agreement." According to the secret cooperation agreement between the two, Dragon-searching City was not in a hurry to defect to Yen-Huang Alliance. Firstly, this could paralyze Shanghai City, and secondly, they could spy on Shanghai City's secret. For dragon-searching acupoint, if it worked well, it could even take both sides. Yen-Huang Alliance wasn't in a hurry either. Although Silver Hand agreed to help, it was too far away. For the time being, they could only cut off Shanghai City's wings and shorten the gap between Yen-Huang Alliance and Shanghai City. After dragon-searching acupoint rebelled and mastered the relevant technology, not only would Overlord City have to build a new navy fleet, Battle Wolves would also have to build a navy in the East Sea Province's Haijiu port, and Di Chen would train the navy in the Zhili Province's Haijin port. Even Lord Chunshan, who was inland, would have to build a navy on the Yangtze River. In this way, Yen-Huang Alliance would be able to control the Bohai Sea, Yellow Sea, and even the East Sea, forming a north-south confrontation with Shanghai City's navy. In addition, Yen-Huang Alliance would also start the industrialization of their territory. With the deep foundation of the aristocratic families and their rich talent pool, they would not be too far behind Shanghai City. However, all of this needed time. Therefore, Yen-Huang Alliance did not want to have a direct conflict with Shanghai City before they were sure. It was undoubtedly the best choice to set up an ambush in the alliance of mountains and seas. Xiongba replied with a smile, "Of course, that's for sure. We're allies, so we definitely won't leave you in the lurch. Besides, if Shanghai City were to take over Minnan Province, they would be facing my Jiangnan Province. Tell me, would I allow Shanghai City to have their way and do nothing?" Xiongba's reply made dragon-seeking Acupoint speechless. Even though he was a stubborn person, deep in his heart, he was still fearful of Shanghai City. If it wasn't for the Yen-Huang Alliance and the Silver Hand supporting him, he would never dare to have the idea of betrayal. The dragon-seeking acupuncture point continued, "If we withdraw from the Mountain and Sea Alliance in the future, the Bank of the Four Seas will definitely cut off our loans to Dragon-Seeking City. In that case, my Dragon-Seeking City will collapse, and Huitong Bank will take over the loan." "That's not a problem," Xiongba readily agreed and lightly said. "Do you have any other requests?" Xuanlong Acupoint Master's expression froze. He understood Xiongba's unspoken words. "Don't push your luck." After thinking for a while, he finally said, "Should I go and persuade the Siege Lion? He's my good brother." "How confident are you?" Xiongba asked. "At least 50%. Xiongba shook his head. "If you don't have full confidence, don't talk about instigating defection. You'd better remove this idea from your mind. Don't you know better than me what kind of opponent Wu Yi is? Don't alert them." Hearing this, dragon-seeking Acupoint looked a little depressed. Xiongba suddenly smiled and patted Xuanlong's shoulder, saying, "Well, don't be discouraged. With Hand of Silver as a backing, there will always be a time to incite the Siege Lion." The Seeking Dragon Acupuncture Point nodded. Seeing this, Xiongba said, "Since we have reached an agreement, there is no need to test each other. Let's sign the cooperation agreement so that you can get the technology authorization earlier, right?" Taking a deep breath, Xuanlong Acupoint expelled all distracting thoughts from his mind and said, "Sign it." At this moment, there was no turning back for Xuanlong Acupoint Master. On the 6th of March, the lords of the China server were dumbfounded by the 3 consecutive system notifications. System notification. Steam engine manufacturing technology has been authorized to more than 5 territories in the China server, officially becoming a common technology in the wilderness. Congratulations to all lords. System notification. Weaving machine manufacturing technology has been authorized to more than 5 territories in the China server, officially becoming a common technology in the wilderness. Congratulations to all lords. System notification. Sailing battleship manufacturing technology has been authorized to more than 5 territories in the China server, officially becoming a common technology in the wilderness. Congratulations to all lords. The lords subconsciously thought that Shanghai City had opened up these 3 key technologies to the public. Almost at the same time, Yen-Huang Alliance made a joint statement on the forums, saying that they had spent a large sum of money to purchase these 3 core technologies from America, and that they had licensed them to the lords of the China server for free, in order to break through the technological barriers of the China server and increase the overall strength of the China server. In the statement, Yen-Huang Alliance claimed to be the leader of the China server. In order to increase the strength of the China server and gain an advantage in the future wars, they had put in a lot of effort. They did not forget to secretly mock Shanghai City, hinting that Shanghai City was too selfish, obtaining advanced technology from the West early on, but keeping it to themselves, not knowing how to share it with the other lords. This time, Yan-Huang alliance had taken the moral high ground. In order to increase their credibility, Yan-Huang alliance even posted the relevant photos on the forums. The evidence was conclusive. Seeing this, the lords immediately fell silent. Yan-Huang alliance's move was beautiful, turning the technology that was originally going to be forcefully promoted by Gaia into their merit. Those who did not know better would have thought that Yan-Huang alliance was some kind of leifeng. The wilderness lords were not idiots, they could roughly understand the logic behind this. However, understanding was one thing, they had benefited greatly from this incident, it was indisputable. Yan-Huang alliance's criticism of Shanghai City, in the eyes of the wilderness lords, was naturally reasonable. That's right. Why did Yan-Huang alliance share the technology so generously? Why did Shanghai City obtain the technology earlier and treat their allies differently? Isn't it because they wanted to prevent the spread of technology? This time, Shanghai City would not be able to clear their name even if they jumped into the Yellow River. If it wasn't for the fact that there were less than 100 wilderness lords after the previous battles, Shanghai City would have become the target of public criticism. With the battle for the satellite cities, as well as this technology licensing incident, Yan-Huang alliance played a beautiful public relations game, turning around the disadvantageous situation after the Battle of Yunnan. And the root of all of this was Silver Hand. Regarding this matter, Shanghai City maintained a rare silence. This slap to the face was indeed painful. Ouyang Shuo never thought that Yan-Huang alliance would be able to obtain these core technologies so quickly. He didn't want to spread these three technologies in China too early, so he was wary of Yan-Huang alliance. This was because Ouyang Shuo knew that once Yan-Huang alliance grasped these core technologies, based on their talent pool, Shanghai City would have no advantage in this industrial competition. In the end, the development of the situation was out of Ouyang Shuo's control, resulting in the current situation. In the government circles, there was a saying, favorable wind and unfavorable wind. It was said that once a person was unfavorable, 100 times would be unfavorable. Ouyang Shuo was wondering if Shanghai City had encountered such a low point. I need to stay calm, Ouyang Shuo thought. The more it was at this time, the more he couldn't panic. With Shanghai City's strength, as long as Ouyang Shuo didn't make a mistake, the opponent wouldn't be able to do anything to Shanghai City. Ouyang Shuo was only surprised, but someone was already flustered and exasperated. This person was naturally Dragon-seeking acupuncture point. Dragon-seeking acupuncture point, the mayor's mansion. When Dragon-seeking acupuncture point heard the system notification, he was stunned for a moment, unable to react. After a while, a sense of shame and anger from being fooled uncontrollably burst forth from the bottom of his heart. F***ck, a bunch of bastards. Xuanlong acupoint was so angry that he flew into a rage in the study. He threw vases, inkstones, scrolls and other things everywhere. Xiongba, I'm not done with you. Dragon-seeking acupuncture point's eyes were bloodshot, wanting to argue with Xiongba. But as soon as he stepped out of the room, he reacted and his face instantly turned pale. The cooperation agreement had already been signed. What could he do to Xiongba now? Fight to the death? The biggest possibility was that the fish would die, but the net wouldn't break. Dragon-seeking acupuncture point had just stepped out of the door, but he slowly retracted his foot. One day, Dragon-seeking acupuncture point locked himself in the study, refusing to see anyone. Even when the maids brought him lunch, they were chased away by him in exasperation. The entire Chancellor's mansion trembled in fear, shrouded in a terrifying atmosphere. And all of this fell into the eyes of those who were observant. Shanghai City, Southern Border Protectorate Manor. In the study, Ouyang Shuo had a complicated expression as he asked, "Have you confirmed the information?" Shun Buhai, the commander of the Shanghai Guards, who was sitting below him, replied, yes. During this period, Dragon-Seeking City and Overlord City have been flirting with each other, and the people from both sides have been meeting frequently. And just yesterday, Dragon-Seeking Acupuncture Point left alone. When he returned to Dragon-Seeking City again, his expression was obviously different. Coupled with his abnormal behavior today, I suspect that the worst situation has already happened. When Dragon-Seeking Acupuncture Point shouted Xiongba, it was clearly heard by the people outside the door. Ouyang Shua nodded. As early as when Dragon-Seeking Acupuncture Point threw a tantrum and contacted a third party, Ouyang Shua had been guarding against Dragon-Seeking City. When the Battle of Chibi ended, he even made a comprehensive emergency plan. He just didn't expect this day to come so soon. Is it Silver Hand again? Such a thought flashed across Ouyang Shua's mind. This was probably the only factor that could make Dragon-Seeking Acupuncture Point so determined. Chapter 825. P.S. There are 15 updates today. Thank you for your support. Please subscribe, please vote, please tip, Ouyang Shua said to Shun Buhai. I know about this matter. After I come down, the Mountain Sea Guards will strengthen their investigation. It would be best if we can gather conclusive evidence. At the same time, get all the chess pieces in Minnan Province to move. They will be put to use immediately. Yes, sir. Shun Buhai nodded solemnly. He had a premonition that his lordship was going to make a move this time. Ouyang Shua was indeed preparing to act. In the face of the Silver Hand's pressure, it was meaningless to retreat. Yan Huang Alliance would never have thought that the chess piece they had just buried would be exposed. They had never expected that Shanghai City would choose to attack at such a time. To the Yan Huang Alliance, this was their weakest period. After the Yan Huang Alliance, who digested the aftereffects of the Yunnan battle, as well as the 3 new core technologies. Even if Shanghai City didn't make a move, the Yan Huang Alliance would provoke them. Since it was like this, then why would Ouyang Shua exercise forbearance? He just happened to strike a lethal blow at this moment. When it was time to act, he had to act decisively. Shanghai City's plan in the Minnan Province was not a matter of a day or two. Even the Dragon-Seeking Acupoint technique couldn't imagine how influential Shanghai City was in Minnan Province. This time, Ouyang Shua wanted to give Yan Huang Alliance a warning. At the same time, it was also a formal declaration of war against the Silver Hand. Since they were destined to be opponents, then let's fight. As soon as Shun Buhai left, Ouyang Shua summoned Du Ruhui Jiasu and Hua Tsubing. That's the situation. Does anyone have any thoughts? Ouyang Shua asked. The 3 of them looked at each other in dismay. They didn't expect that Jun Shang would start a war when the country was about to be established. Du Ruhui frowned even more. The new round of army reorganization had not yet been completed, and it was too hasty to start a war now. However, the reason given by Jun Shang made them unable to refute it. Then let's fight. Du Ruhui finally said, leaving such a hidden danger, even if we establish a country, I'm afraid it won't be stable. It's better to attack decisively and avoid future troubles. With Du Ruhui's statement, the matter was considered past. Jia Su was the chief librarian, so he only had the right to make suggestions, but not the right to make decisions. Hua Tsubing was the general of the army. If the emperor wanted to fight, he would be more than happy to. There was no reason for him to refuse. Ouyang Shua nodded and said, I know that Shanghai City is in the critical period of advancing to become a capital city. Therefore, the war cannot be dragged on for too long. If we are to fight, we must finish it quickly. When he think of a plan. As the territory's #1 strategist, Jia Su was naturally duty-bound. After thinking for a while, Jia Su slowly said, the most effective way to end the battle quickly is to kill the leader. Moreover, it has to be fast, before the Yan Huang Alliance can react. That way, even if the Yan-Huang alliance wants to intervene, they won't be able to. Ouyang Shua said, "You mean we should attack dragon-seeking city directly? Not bad." Jia Su nodded. Ouyang Shua didn't come to a conclusion immediately. He shouted outside, "Bring me the map!" After a while, 2 imperial bodyguards came in and found a map of Minnan province. They hung it on the west wall of Ouyang Shua's study. This was specially used by Ouyang Shua to hang map. He would change the maps from time to time. Ouyang Shua and the others moved in front of the map. Minnan province was surrounded by mountains and the sea. 90% of the land area was mountainous and hilly. It was known as 8 mountains, 1 water, and 1 field. The coastline of the province was long and winding, mainly eroded by the coast. There were many islands scattered all over. Since Minnan province was located at the transportation hub of the East and South Seas, it could reach South Asia, West Asia, and East Africa by sea. It was the starting point of the historical maritime Silk Road and Zheng He's voyages to the west. It was also the distribution center of maritime commerce. Minnan province's coastal civilization was mainly marine civilization. It was also the origin of Mazu culture. Inland, it was mainly a farming civilization of Hakka people. Hakka culture was flourishing. In the game, Minnan province was divided into 5 counties. From north to south, they were Longyan County near Lingnan province, Chuanzhou County near Chuanzhou County, Jiangchuan Province bordering Jiangchuan Province, Shaowu County, and Fuyong County occupied by dragon-seeking city. Fuyong County was located at the north end of Minnan Province. It bordered Jiangnan Province to the north and Chuanzhou County to the south. Ouyang Shua pointed at the map and said, "If we want to kill dragon-seeking city, we have to pass through Longyan County and Tingzhou County. With the Mountain Sea Guard's operations in Minnan Province, it's not difficult to cover the army passing through these 2 counties." After the 4th system update, it was forbidden for territories to form alliances with territories that were not part of the alliance to temporarily borrow the teleportation formation and use the so-called teleportation tactic. Therefore, the army of Shanghai City could only pass through Minnan Province and directly attack the enemy. Among the 5 counties in Minnan Province, apart from Chuanzhou County and Fuyong County, more than 70% of the lords of Longyan County, Tingzhou County, and Shaowu County were Shanghai City's secret allies. The so-called Shanghai Alliance Dragon-Seeking Alliance formed by Dragon-Seeking City was just a gift for Shanghai City. After the 4th system update, the alliance was forced to disband. Secretly, through the Chamberlain of Dependencies, the Mountain Sea Guards, and the Black Snake Guards, these territories had quietly sided with Shanghai City and signed a secret agreement. As long as Shanghai City's army arrived, these territories would change their flags and join Shanghai City. Ouyang Shua would not mistreat these lords and promised them generous rewards. His purpose was to be able to control the situation in Minnan Province when Dragon-Seeking City was in trouble. However, Ouyang Shua did not expect that he would have to use these chess pieces so soon. Ouyang Shua originally wanted to nurture them for a period of time and produce a batch of refugees. Now it seemed that he could only take the opportunity of attacking Dragon-Seeking City and completely take over the entire Minnan Province. This operation would definitely cause the Yan-Huang Alliance's eyeballs to explode. Ouyang Shua pointed to the map and said, "After the army leaves Tingzhou County and enters Fuyong County, it will be difficult to hide their tracks. Dragon-Seeking City has been operating in this county for more than a year, so they are not to be trifled with." Jia Su smiled and already had a plan. He said, "It's not completely impossible. We can let the spies lurking in Fuyong County spread some rumors, such as bandits and roving bandits in the border counties to confuse the public and let the army fish in troubled waters." Ouyang Shua smiled. "That's a good idea." After the 4th system update, the marching speed of the army had greatly increased. If it was an elite cavalry unit, It would only take 2 days at most to reach Dragon-Seeking City from the border of Fuyong County. They would be able to fish in troubled waters in time. As a member of the Mountain and Sea Alliance, Dragon-Seeking City not only had the same military establishment as Mountain and Sea City, but also the composition and deployment of the army were almost the same. There was an Imperial Guard Division and a City Guard Division stationed in Dragon-Seeking City. Each of the 5 prefectures of Fuyong County had a garrison brigade. The rest was a fully organized field army, the Dragon-Seeking Army. This army was not deployed at the border, but stationed not far from Dragon-Seeking City. Although the Mountain Sea Guards could not protect the army in Fuyong County unimpeded, there were hundreds of chess pieces buried in Dragon-Seeking City. One of the core chess pieces was the confidant of Dragon-Seeking Acupoint. As mentioned before, Dragon-Seeking Acupoint was betrayed in his previous life, and almost lost their nest. In this life, this person appeared again. What was different was that this person transformed into a mole of the Black Snake Guards with a shake of his body. The Mountain Sea Guards took over the resources of the Black Snake Guards, so naturally, they took over this person. The information that Dragon-Seeking Acupoint blurted out, Xiongba, in the study was sent by this spy. Therefore, the army of Mountain Sea City only needed to fish in troubled waters and successfully arrive at the outskirts of Dragon-Seeking City, then annihilate the Dragon-Seeking army stationed outside the city. The spy hidden in Dragon-Seeking City was confident that he could create chaos in Dragon-Seeking City, open the city gates, and lead the army into the city, then take down Dragon-Seeking City in one fell swoop. With such a little time, Dragon-Seeking Acupoint might not even be able to call for help. After the plan was decided, Oyengshe looked at Hua Tsubing and said, "With the current conditions, do you have the confidence to take down Dragon-Seeking City before the Yen-Huang alliance can react?" Hua Tsubing was shocked when he heard this. Although the Emperor's summons basically meant that the Imperial Guards would participate in this battle, Hua Tsubing was still a little excited to be appointed by the Emperor. This kind of long-range surprise attack was Hua Tsubing's forte. Hua Tsubing bowed and said confidently, "The Imperial Guards only need to send 2 cavalry legions to complete this mission." Oyengshe smiled in satisfaction. He admired Hua Tsubing's confidence. He turned to Du Ruhui and said, "Inform the 3rd Legion of the Brave Tiger Army. After the Imperial Guards succeed, immediately advance into Minnan Province and cooperate with the Imperial Guards to take over the 4 counties of Minnan Province. Wipe out all remaining resistance forces." Within Minnan Province, there were naturally people who were not convinced by Mountain Sea City. However, these territories were scattered and unorganized, so they did not pose much of a threat to Mountain Sea City. When the 3rd Legion of the Brave Tiger Army advanced into Minnan Province, apart from wiping out the remaining resistance forces, they were also responsible for taking over the troops that entered Mountain Sea City's territory and reorganizing them. Conservatively speaking, they could reorganize 1.5 field corps. Yes. Du Ruhui nodded. Next, the 4 of them discussed the specific battle plan with the map of Minnan Province. War was not child's play. The general direction had been decided, but the details could not be careless. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would lose everything. Apart from that, the existence of a battle plan was also necessary to draw up various contingency plans and countermeasures. The battlefield was ever-changing, and anything could happen. Some could be dealt with on the battlefield, but some needed to be considered clearly before the battle. For example, if the Imperial Guards' whereabouts were exposed when they passed through Longyan County or Tingzhou County, how to deal with it, or if the Yen-Huang Alliance's army was teleported to Dragon-Seeking City in time, how to deal with it. In short, there were many things to do, and the intelligence department had to be involved in the entire process. However, time waited for no man. While the General Administration of Military Affairs was still formulating a detailed battle plan, the army was about to set off ahead of time. That night, the 2nd and 3rd Legions of the Imperial Guards quietly left Mountain Sea City through the teleportation array in King City. They were teleported to Zhenhai City, and then transported to Longyan County by the Ezhou fleet. A great battle that no one had expected had broken out just like that. At this time, the dragon-seeking acupoint was still wrangling with Xiongba through letters. Chapter 826. On the night of the 7th of March, the warship carrying the Imperial Guards temporarily docked at the coastal port of Longyan County in Minnan Province and successfully delivered 2 cavalry legions to the front line. With the speed of the Imperial Guards, it would only take 5 days to reach the border of Fuyong County. There was actually a port in Fuyong County. If the army could be sent directly to Fuyong County, it would indeed save a lot of time and trouble. However, Ouyang Shua did not dare to take the risk with the dragon-seeking city patrolling the waters. After betraying the Shanghai alliance, the dragon-seeking city would definitely be extremely sensitive to any movements of Shanghai City. As long as the Ezhou fleet appeared in the waters, it would probably cause a misunderstanding. This was a risk that could not be taken. While the front line was surging, everything was as usual in Shanghai City. Although Ouyang Shua was concerned about the war in Minnan Province, he acted as if nothing had happened and continued doing what he was supposed to do. He even took the time to publish an article with his name on the Daily Dispatch to warm up the popularity of Country and Beauty. As soon as the article was published, it caused a heated discussion. Some people saw the business opportunity and were eager to give it a try. Of course, there was no lack of mockery. Some people joked that Shanghai City had been humiliated twice by the Yen-Huang alliance. How could Wu Wui still have the mood to be so carefree? It was really a case of playing with things and losing one's will. Ouyang Shua naturally laughed at these malicious words. Why should he care about them? Other than that, Ouyang Shua focused on the promotion mission of the capital. During the day, Jiang Shang led an assessment team and began to conduct a 3-day mock assessment of Shanghai City. They either went in and out of the various agencies of the Protectorate to check the files or went deep into the city to investigate. According to Ouyang Shua's instructions, the Shanghai Guards strengthened the surveillance of the city, especially the city gate and the teleportation array. For the time being, they had not found any suspicious people. There was still no news from the divination witch of the 36 Lines mission, which made Ouyang Shua quite anxious. However, there was a breakthrough in the New Troops mission. Du Ruhui reported that someone had found a herd of wild elephants in a valley between Mengding County and Tingyue County. Xia Hoing, the head of the general office, had personally gone to take care of this matter. If it went well, the General Office of Military Affairs would be able to use this as a foundation to train a war elephant troop and complete the New Troops mission. According to the real map, that should be the Zishuangbana region. No wonder there were elephants. In reality, Zishuangbana was the only place in China that still had elephants. Ouyang Shua was overjoyed when he heard this. Ouyang Shua was no stranger to the war elephant troop. During the Battle of Mai, the Shang dynasty's army had a troop of war elephants. They wore heavy armor and were very destructive on the battlefield, leaving a deep impression on Ouyang Shua. In ancient times, war elephants were used as special forces, and in ancient cold weapon warfare, they played the role of modern tank. Trained war elephants charge and break through enemy lines in battle. They are brave and invincible. They can break city gates, destroy barracks, dismantle weapons, trample over enemy troops, break enemy lines, and often cause great casualties to the enemy. If they really wanted to train the war elephants, not only would they be able to complete the mission, but they would also be able to provide the territory with a new type of soldier. If it was allocated to the various field armies and used properly, it would be able to display miraculous effects. March 8, Shanghai City. On this day, Song Jia, who had been out for 6 days, finally returned to Shanghai City. According to the time flow in the instance dungeon, Song Jia's group had stayed in the Kunlun Instance dungeon for a total of 2 months. As the first person to conquer a wuxia instance, they naturally gained a lot. According to Song Jia, there were 3 core rewards after clearing the instance dungeon. One was the Zifu Yuan Zong that Liang Xiao had obtained from the pure Yang Iron Box. It was said to be a martial arts secret manual passed down by Lu Dongbin when he became immortal. The foundation of the martial arts of the West Kunlun sect was the Purple Mansion Yuan Zong, which was similar to another very famous secret book, the Nine Yang Sutra. The second was the Guizhong swordsmanship that Gong Yangyu had created. It was the best sword technique in the world. It contained everything, including the 8 trigrams, the 5 elements of heaven and earth, and all the sword techniques in the world were hidden in it. The sword techniques were divided into 8 types: Qian, Kun, Zhen, Sun, Kan, Li, Zhen, and Dui. According to the principles of the Guizhong, they interacted and developed, creating everything in the world. The 8 trigrams sword technique had extraordinary power, and it could be combined to create a new sword technique. 8 by 8, there were 64 trigrams, so it could give rise to 64 different sword techniques. When different sword techniques were used together, they were unpredictable. Their attributes were very different, but their power was extraordinary. The third was Gong Yangyu's divine armament, the green hornless sword. This sword was forged by the master swordsmith, Oolongzi, and Gong Yangyu was the guardian of the sword. Other than the 3 core items, the spoils of war included more than 10 different weapons, all of them at the dark gold rank and above. There were more than 10 martial arts manuals, the worst of which were at the gold rank, with most of them being at the king rank. The bountiful harvest far exceeded the 850,000 gold coins Xiesiun had spent to bid for the dungeon key. Ignoring the rest, just any one of the 3 core items was worth more than 500,000 gold coins. According to the previous agreement, Song Jia had the right to choose one of the core items. She chose the Guizhong swordsmanship that Gong Yangyu had created. After leaving the dungeon, Gaia had automatically renamed it to the Guizhong Swordsmanship Sutra, an emperor-ranked manual. Song Jia's choice was firstly because the 9-yin sutra she cultivated clashed with the Zifu Yuan Zong. She could not cultivate it even if she wanted it. No matter how sharp the green hornless sword was, it could not compare to the pure June sword, one of the 10 famous swords in Song Jia's hands. Secondly, Song Jia really needed a top sword technique. The Yu Maiden sword was already somewhat outdated. The Guizhong Swordsmanship Sutra was extensive and profound. It was enough for Song Jia to include it in her main cultivation technique, allowing her to benefit from it for the rest of her life. Even if she were to encounter other sword manuals in the future, she could incorporate them into the Guizhong Swordsmanship Sutra. Thirdly, as the sect master of the Eastern Fence Sword Sect, Song Jia could list the Guizhong Swordsmanship Sutra as the cornerstone martial art of the sect, enriching the sect's martial arts. The Guizhong Swordsmanship Sutra could derive 64 sword technique. When imparting it to disciples, it could be imparted selectively according to their aptitude and status. Such a manual was most suitable to be placed in the sect. With the release of the martial world's winds and clouds, the martial world was in turmoil. The Eastern Fence Sword Sect was truly lucky to obtain this sword manual. It was greatly beneficial to the overall strength of the sect. Other than the Guizhong Swordsmanship Sutra, Xiesiun had given Song Jia a small gift before leaving the dungeon. It was a small booklet named 10 Calculations of Heavenly Secret. This booklet was placed together with the Zifu Yuan Zong. Although it was mediocre, it was still considered a wondrous item. The 10 Calculations of Heavenly Secrets were engraved in front of a blue stone wall next to the Yin and Yang illusionary formation of the Tianji Palace. They were 10 calculation questions written by the previous masters of the Tianji Palace. They were originally left by the previous masters of the Tianji Palace to be solved by the later generations. When the 8th calculation was engraved, No one could solve it for 100 years, until the Tsangming divine calculation Hua Yuanmao appeared. Hua Yuanmao was a genius. After solving the 8th calculation, he gave 2 more calculation questions. He engraved the 9th calculation and solved it himself. At this time, Hua Yuanmao's mastery of calculation could be said to be unprecedented, but he was still not satisfied. He gave the elements outside the elements, asking for the solution of any dimension. In order to learn the Tai diffraction sword and save his mother, who was taken away by Shao Qianjue, Xiao Liang Shao made a bet with the master of the Tianji Palace and tried his best to solve the 10 calculations of heavenly secrets. He didn't expect that the last question could not be solved. Liang Shao spent 5 years and only solved the 9th calculation. The 10th calculation was called Elements Outside the Elements, asking for the solution of any dimension. It wasn't until 400 years later when a large group of calculation geniuses appeared in France. They used Western calculation as a foundation and finally found another way to solve it. But even then, they only managed to find the method. If one wanted to calculate, it would be impossible even if they used their entire life's effort. After another few hundred years, with the help of machinery, they could do as they pleased. This booklet is useless to us. You can have it. These were Xie Xiun's original words. After returning to Shanghai City, Song Jia gave the booklet to Ouyang Shu. Ouyang Shu accepted it calmly and put it in his storage bag. Such a special item might come in handy in the future. He naturally didn't mind keeping it. In the following days, the wilderness was calm and peaceful. There was no more big news. During this period, Ouyang Shu was either paying attention to the progress of the capital's advancement mission or sending letters to the lords of Minnan province to make final confirmations to prevent any accidents. The results of Jiang Shang's mock assessment were very ideal. As long as the officials sent by the Great Li Imperial Court didn't deliberately make things difficult for them, Shanghai City would have no problem completing the Imperial Court assessment mission. This was normal. If Shanghai City couldn't meet the assessment standards with its deep accumulation, Ouyang Shu couldn't imagine any other lord's city that could reach Shanghai City's level. Just based on the 2 highest educational institutions, the Southwest University China Academy and the Military Academy, no one could beat them. Shanghai City had obtained titles such as Holy Land of 100 Clans, Holy Land of Craftsmen, Prosperous Land of Martial Arts, and Home of Spirit Beasts. Ouyang Shu wasn't busy, but the Shanghai Guards and the Honglu Temple were extremely busy. Not only did they have to coordinate with their allies along the way to arrange a safe route for the army, but they also had to secretly supply the army to prevent the enemy from noticing anything amiss. Other than that, they also had to create rumors in Fuyong County and incite bandits to create chaos in the county. Everything was related to the success or failure of the war. They couldn't be careless. Shen Buhai and Zhang Yi were walking on thin ice. They were afraid that something would go wrong and couldn't sleep at night. Fortunately, the Imperial Guards finally arrived at the border on the 12th of the 3rd month. At the same time, rumors were spreading in Fuyong County according to Jia Su's plan. Huatsubing didn't rest and led his troops straight to Dragon Search City. However, he became more careful when marching. Most of the time, the army had to split into 5 or 6 groups to avoid being exposed. Even if they were accidentally discovered along the way, they would just think that they were bandits. On the night of the 13th of the 3rd month, the Imperial Guards successfully arrived at the outskirts of Dragon Search City. The 6 groups of troops along the way met in a forest 20 miles away from the Dragon Search Army and camped there to hide their track. After entering Fuyong County, the army's supplies were completely supported by military ration pills. In just one day, they needed to consume more than 300,000 military ration pills, which were worth tens of thousands of gold. As long as they waited for dawn, the army would be able to head straight for the main camp. When Ouyang Shu heard the news, he found it hard to sleep. What kind of upheaval would the shocking attack of Shanghai City cause in the China region and even the whole world? Ouyang Shua didn't know for now. Chapter 8:27 14th of March, Dragon-Seeking City. At daybreak, Huatsubing led the 140,000 Imperial Guards under the guidance of a spy from the Military Intelligence Bureau. They silently made their way to the Dragon-Seeking Legion's encampment. Along the way, Huatsubing's personal guards removed all the hidden sentries without making a sound. The patrolling soldiers only noticed them when they were less than 5 miles away from the encampment. Unfortunately, it was too late. Charge! Huatsubing tightened his legs on the back of his horse. He waved his sword and ordered the entire army to charge. At the same time, Huatsubing activated his mounted warrior specialty and gave the army a super buff. Charge! With the order, the army immediately sped up and the warhorses neighed. Lu Bu and Ma Chao, this pair of peerless generals, each led an army. They split into 2 groups and charged forward personally. Just like Huatsubing, they also activated their specialties. According to Gaia's settings for generals, the effect of a general's specialties would only be applied to the troops they commanded and not the entire army. Therefore, Huatsubing could buff both armies at the same time, while Lu Bu and Ma Chao's buffs were only applied to their respective armies. Further down, Chao Chun and Ma Ting's specialties were only applied to their respective armies. They advanced layer by layer. The Imperial Guards, who had been buffed by the double buff, were like arrows that had been released from a bow, or like a stormy sea, charging towards the military camp with an unstoppable momentum. The guards at the entrance of the encampment wanted to close the gates, but before they could do so, a round of arrows rained down on them. Not a single person was left alive. The guards on the wooden walls of the encampment had just fired a round of arrows when the vanguard of the Imperial Guards had already rushed to the foot of the encampment. Like a bulldozer, they charged into the encampment. Any enemy who stood in the way of the Imperial Guards would only have one fate: death. After charging into the encampment, Lu Bu had already received the order to personally lead a group of troops to the central camp. As long as they could take down Commander Qin Xiong of the Dragon-Seeking Legion, there would be no more suspense in this battle. At this moment, the central tent was in chaos. Early in the morning, the soldiers of the Dragon-Seeking Legion were awakened by the deafening battle cries before they could even get out of bed. They broke out in cold sweat. Qin Xiong woke up and was washing up when a guard suddenly came to report. "General, bad news. Enemy attack." Enemy attack? Qin Xiong did not panic when he received the report. He asked, "Which group of people are they? Did they eat a bear's heart or a leopard's gall?" Qin Xiong thought that the newcomers were bandits or roving bandits who had been causing quite a ruckus recently. In Fuyong County, there was really no one who could shake the Dragon-Seeking Legion. The guard's face was deathly pale as he said, "General, it's the Imperial Guards of Shanghai City." Just the mention of this name caused the guard to feel an immense pressure. As Qin Xiong's personal guard, the guard often accompanied Qin Xiong on expeditions, and he had witnessed the might and terror of Shanghai City's Imperial Guards. The guards could never have imagined that there would be a day when they would have to fight against such an army. Just thinking about it made one's limbs go weak. What? Qin Xiong was also in disbelief. How could it be the Shanghai City Imperial Guards? Is there a mistake? Qin Xiong didn't know that he had secretly betrayed the alliance of mountains and seas. Just like the poor guard, no matter how imaginative Qin Xiong was, he could never have imagined that the Shanghai City Imperial Guards would come here. Is the southern border governor going to exterminate the Dragon-Seeking City just because the Lord made a few complaints? Qin Xiong could only speculate in this way, feeling indignant for his lord in his heart. The guard hesitated and asked, "General, what should we do now?" Qin Xiong's face was gloomy as he asked, "Have you sent a letter to the Lord by pigeon?" The guard replied, "Yes, I have. I've warned the Lord as soon as possible." Qin Xiong nodded, and his expression suddenly became firm. He said, "Since Shanghai City is so heartless, we can only fight to the death." As he said this, Qin Xiong walked out of the central tent with his halberd in hand, mounted his warhorse, and began to assemble the troops. The guard listened and silently followed the general. They really had no other choice. While Qin Xiong was assembling the troops, there was suddenly a rush of horse hooves in front of them. Focusing his gaze, he saw a tall and mighty general leading his troops over. This general was clad in golden beast armor, holding a heavenly halberd in his hand, and riding on a majestic white warhorse. It was Lu Bu. "Who are you?" Qin Xiong didn't recognize Lu Bu. Lu Bu smiled. Riding on the scarlet rabbit horse, he looked extremely ferocious. He laughed loudly and said, "You are Qin Xiong, right? Listen up, I am Lu Bu, Lu Fengxian." Qin Xiong's eyes narrowed when he heard this. Lu Bu's name was known even in the Sui and Tang dynasties. "Why did you attack my army?" Qin Xiong asked. Lu Bu said, "Your lord betrayed Shanghai City and secretly formed an alliance with our enemy, the Yanhuang Alliance. How can we not punish such a rebellious act?" "Don't slander me." Qin Xiong didn't believe it. Lu Bu smiled and sat on the red rabbit horse. He said leisurely, "You know my lord's character. If there is no conclusive evidence, why would he attack you?" "Then show me the evidence." Qin Xiong felt uneasy. He noticed that the eyes of the soldiers around him were wandering when they heard Lu Bu's words. The ancients hated betrayal. If his lord really did such a thing, the seeking dragon army's morale would be lowered for no reason. Lu Bu smiled and said, "What evidence do you need? Isn't it better to go with me and confront your lord?" What he meant was that he wanted Qin Xiong to surrender. Unlike Qing Yaojin, Qin Xiong was known for his good temper and wouldn't get angry easily. But after hearing Lu Bu's words, coupled with the uneasiness in his heart, Qin Xiong's blood boiled. He said, "So, we can't settle this peacefully today?" Lu Bu shook his head and said, "As long as you put down your weapons, everything can be discussed." "You've gone too far." Qin Xiong was furious. He didn't care what the truth was and said, "Since you're so arrogant, then let's fight." Both of them were fierce generals, and it was best to talk with their fists. No matter if it was reasonable or not, the one who won was reasonable, and the one who lost was unreasonable. Lu Bu laughed and said, "That's exactly what I was thinking." He was a martial arts fanatic, but he hadn't met many decent opponents in the Three Kingdoms, so he couldn't fight to his heart's content. Now that he was in the wilderness and in Shanghai City, Lu Bu was like a fish in water. Not only did the Imperial Guards have a strong opponent like Ma Chao, but the other armies also had many fierce generals. Eli, Su Chu, Shi Wansui, and the others were all top-notch generals. This made Lu Bu very happy. Usually, he would find Ma Chao to spar with, and when he had nothing to do, he would go out of the city to find Eli to spar with. Eli was also a martial arts fanatic, but the two of them ended up fighting each other. Now that he saw Qin Xiong, Lu Bu was itching to fight again. It wasn't that Lu Bu was delaying things, but that he didn't even care about military orders to fight. Lu Bu knew that if he didn't subdue Qin Xiong with his martial arts, he wouldn't surrender. To deal with a fierce general, one had to use a fierce general's method. Huatsubing had given this task to Lu Bu because of this consideration. As they spoke, the two fierce generals had already set up their battle formation, and a battle of generals was about to begin. The soldiers of the Seeking Dragon army were already bewildered. Seeing that their commander had stepped forward, they stopped fighting, unwilling to sacrifice innocent lives. Everything could wait until the battle was over before making a decision. Just like that, the battle near the Central Army's tent gradually calmed down. The army made way for the two commanders to have a good fight. The two fierce generals both used halberds. Without saying anything, they immediately started fighting. They didn't use their full strength in their first fight. They were just testing each other's strength. Qin Xiong couldn't help but laugh bitterly in his heart. Lu Bu's bravery was indeed well-deserved. His terrifying strength alone was enough to destroy more than 90% of the generals. During the Three Kingdoms period, whenever Lu Bu fought generals, his heavenly halberd didn't have any fancy moves. He only used a few basic moves, and that was enough to force his opponent into a corner. There was no other reason than the huge difference in strength. Lu Bu's seemingly light attack actually contained terrifying strength. His opponent couldn't withstand it, and had to pay 120% of his attention to block it. As such, he naturally couldn't use his exquisite moves. Therefore, if he really wanted to force Lu Bu to use his ultimate moves, he had to be on par with him in terms of strength. For example, Ma Chao and Eli were on the same level as Lu Bu. Even if there was a slight difference, they could use their techniques to make up for it. Although Qin Xiong looked gentle, his strength wasn't weak. However, compared to a peerless warrior like Lu Bu, he was still a level lower. He was immediately at a disadvantage in the battle. Fortunately, Qin Xiong's halberd techniques were adept, and he had received the teachings of a master, so he didn't lose immediately. Seeing this, Lu Bu's fighting spirit rose even higher. Most people misunderstood Lu Bu, thinking that he only used his strength to suppress others. In reality, not only was Lu Bu extremely strong, but his martial arts skills were also extraordinary. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been called a peerless warrior. Whether it was halberds, bows, spears, or broadswords, Lu Bu was proficient in all of them. Especially his halberd technique. When Lu Bu saw that Qin Xiong's halberd techniques were quite exquisite, he immediately became interested. He wasn't in a hurry to defeat Qin Xiong. Instead, he forced Qin Xiong to use his halberd techniques step by step to feast his eyes. Just like that, the scene was very exciting. The soldiers who didn't know much about the halberd techniques felt their blood boiling, and they couldn't help but applaud. Unknowingly, Ma Chao had also arrived at the central camp with his troop. Seeing that Qin Xiong's halberd techniques were really exquisite, he couldn't help but applaud. The battle between the two went on for 40 to 50 rounds. Even though Lu Bu was going easy, Qin Xiong was getting more and more exhausted. He had already used the halberd techniques 3 times. Seeing that Qin Xiong had no more new moves, Lu Bu didn't want to delay any longer. He waved his heavenly halberd and used 90% of his strength. This time, Qin Xiong couldn't hold on any longer, and could only defend himself. After 10 rounds, under Lu Bu's fierce attacks, Qin Xiong's face turned pale, and he had no choice but to admit defeat. Lu Bu didn't have the slightest intention to humiliate Qin Xiong. He withdrew his heavenly halberd and said, "Your halberd techniques are indeed exquisite, and I've learned a lot. Whether what I said was true or not, the truth will naturally come to light after we take down the dragon-seeking city. Before that, I'll have to trouble you and your troops to stay in the camp for the time being." Qin Xiong's expression was dejected, but he was already 70% convinced. Chapter 828. Qin Xiong held his halberd and sat on the back of his horse. He looked around and saw that the entire military camp had quietened down. The dragon-seeking army was surrounded by the Shanghai City Imperial Guards and had no chance of winning. More importantly, the news of his lord's betrayal of Shanghai City had spread throughout the military camp. The army had no will to fight, and the general had been ambushed by the Imperial Guards. How could the army have any morale left? Even if Qin Xiong insisted on fighting, not many soldiers would fight with him. When Qin Xiong saw this, he sighed in his heart. He had a faint premonition that regardless of whether the Lord had betrayed them or not, Dragon-Seeking City would be removed from the wilderness from today onwards. As a veteran who had witnessed the growth of Dragon-Seeking City, Qin Xiong had mixed feelings. At that moment, Huatsubing arrived at the central tent surrounded by his guards. Both the Imperial Guards and the soldiers of the dragon-seeking army parted to make way for him. It was respect from the bottom of their hearts for the divine generals. Lu Bu and the other generals got off their horses one by one, not daring to be careless. Even Qin Xiong got off his horse and looked at Hua Tsubing with a complicated expression. The name of the general of white cavalry was renowned throughout history. Hua Tsubing was still as handsome as ever. He got off his horse and came to Qin Xiong. Shanghai City is indebted to you. His Majesty said that there is no need to force you to make a decision immediately. When we take down Dragon-Seeking City and the truth is revealed, you will make a decision. Qin Xiong was silent. He did not expect that the Duke of Shanghai still remembered the fact that he was seconded to Shanghai City to teach the cavalry halberd technique. Hua Tsubing continued, "Before that, I will have to trouble you to restrain the troops and wait for news in the camp." Hua Tsubing was very tactful and gave Qin Xiong enough face. Qin Xiong had nothing else to say. He nodded dejectedly and cupped his fists. "The defeated general is at your disposal." Hua Tsubing smiled and did not mind. As Qin Xiong admitted defeat, the dragon-seeking army was taken down. Hua Tsubing arranged for Lu Bu's army to guard the camp and disarmed the soldiers and put them under house arrest. Time was of the essence. Hua Tsubing did not delay any longer. He reorganized his troops and led Ma Chao's army to attack Dragon-Seeking City. There would be variables if they did not take down Dragon-Seeking City. Dragon-Seeking City, City Lord Mansion. 10 minutes after the Imperial Guards charged into the camp of the Seeking Dragon Army, a messenger pigeon flew over from afar and landed in the pigeon house, bringing an urgent battle report from the front line. There was only one line of words on the letter. Shanghai City's Imperial Guards have suddenly attacked. Danger? Seeking Dragon Acupoint received the messenger pigeon and his face instantly turned pale. He was stunned on the spot and muttered to himself, "Have I been exposed so quickly? No, I have to inform Xiong Ba and the others immediately." The sudden turn of events threw the dragon-seeking Acupoint master into a state of confusion. The hand holding the brush trembled faintly, and drops of ink appeared on the letter. He had to rewrite the letter twice before he was able to finish it. Just as he was about to ask someone to mail the letter, the personal guard outside the door ran in and said, "Reporting to my lord, there is a sudden large-scale riot in the city. Many places in the city are on fire." Bada. The letter in Sun Long's hand fell to the ground, and his expression was blank. He didn't even need to think to know that the arsonist was definitely a spy from Shanghai City. This is a premeditated attack. The situation was urgent, and Sun Long couldn't think too much. He said to the personal guard, "Send this letter first. Order the City Guard Division to cooperate with the bailiffs to maintain order in the city. Any troublemakers are to be killed without mercy. At the same time, order the Imperial Guard Division to gather at the City Lord's mansion without delay." After a pause, Sun Long continued, "Order all the guard brigades to gather at the Seeking Dragon City immediately." "Yes, my lord." The personal guard turned and left. Hearing the noise coming from the city from time to time, Sun Long was like an ant on a hot pan. He paced back and forth in the study, but didn't know how to deal with it. If the Shanghai City Imperial Guards really charged into the city, the Imperial Guard Division and the City Guard Division would definitely not be able to defend. As for the local guard brigades, they could only do their best and leave the rest to fate. Right now, his only hope was the Yan-Huang alliance. "I hope those guys will keep their word this time." After being ruthlessly played by Xiong Ba, Sun Long's impression of the Yan-Huang alliance was extremely bad. After all, they were not on the same path. Thinking of this, Sun Long returned to his seat and wrote a letter. He needed to urgently contact his allies in the Minnan province and call on everyone to fight against the invasion of Shanghai City. In a hurry, Sun Long forgot how the Shanghai City Imperial Guards suddenly appeared in Fuyong County. Just as the dragon-seeking acupoint technique was going all out, a series of soul-stirring assassinations were taking place in Dragon-Seeking City. First, the courier station was attacked. Although the city guard army arrived in time, the scene was still chaotic, so the spies of the major forces hiding in the wilderness of the Seeking Dragon City could not send the news out immediately. Then, the personal guard responsible for delivering the letter to Sun Long was attacked by a crossbow as soon as he walked out of the city lord's mansion. He was seriously injured and fell to the ground. The surrounding personal guards saw that they were facing a great enemy. They protected the wounded and arranged for others to deliver the letter. Another person was attacked by a crossbow as soon as he walked out. In less than 10 minutes, 4 people were killed on the way to deliver the letter. The personal guards' faces were livid. They did not dare to act rashly, and the two sides continued to waste time. As long as the Imperial Guard army rushed over, the situation would be resolved. This delay lasted for more than half an hour. By the time the messenger arrived at the courier station under the heavy protection of the Imperial Guard army, suppressed the riot at the courier station, and sent the letter out, almost an hour had passed. During this time, Huatsubing had already taken down the Seeking Dragon army and headed straight for Seeking Dragon City. Overlord City, City Lord's Mansion. Upon receiving the letter for help from Sun Long, Xiong Ba immediately summoned Wu Qi. General, in your opinion, what should we do now? Should we send reinforcements immediately, or should we inform the other allies and wait for the army to be assembled before sending troops? Xiong Ba asked. Wu Qi said, How long do you think Seeking Dragon City can last, Lord? This. Xiong Ba was speechless. His face was filled with indescribable anger as he scolded, Sun Long is a failure. It's only been a few days and he's already exposed. I'm afraid there are spies of Shanghai City around him. However, Wu Qi was not in a position to interrupt. Xiong Ba said to himself, To think that he had the cheek to swear in front of me that he had been guarding against Shanghai City for a long time and would never leak the news. What an idiot! If he had known this would happen, Xiong Ba would not have turned the Seeking Dragon City. Now, not only did he fail to defeat the tiger, he was bitten by the tiger instead. If Dragon City fell, Overlord City would immediately face Shanghai City head-on. Thinking of this, Xiong Ba was furious. Seeing this, Wu Qi reminded, Lord, you need to make a decision soon. Xiong Ba said, General, do you mean to send reinforcements immediately without waiting for the allies? Wu Qi nodded. If you don't want to lose Dragon City as a barrier, you can only send troops immediately. With Shanghai City's means, I'm worried that if we are a little late, it will be too late. Xiong Ba's expression was uncertain. He gritted his teeth and said, General is right, this matter cannot be delayed. How about this, you lead 2 armies and rush over first. I will contact the allies in the rear before gathering the army. That's good. Wu Qi nodded. Xiong Ba was also a decisive person. He cupped his fists and said, Thank you, General. Saying this, he took out the commander's seal and handed it to Wu Qi, giving Wu Qi the right to mobilize troops. Wu Qi took the commander's seal, saluted, and turned to leave. Seeing this, Xiong Ba felt a little uneasy. Shanghai City had been suppressed by the Yan-Huang alliance twice. If they suddenly attacked at this time, it would not be so simple. No matter what, they couldn't let Overlord City take the brunt of it alone. Thinking of this, Xiong Ba immediately returned to the table and sent a letter to Di Chen and the others, letting them know that Overlord City was advancing to discuss important matters. A series of events that happened later confirmed Xiong Ba's uneasiness. At noon on the 14th of March, before the army led by Wu Qi reached the border, the news that Dragon City had been captured by Shanghai City spread throughout the wilderness. Xiong Ba immediately broke out in a cold sweat when he received the news. He urgently ordered Wu Qi's army to rest in place for the time being. In Overlord City, Xiong Ba and Di Chen and the others urgently discussed countermeasures. But before they could come to a conclusion, a series of battle reports stunned Xiong Ba and the others. Almost at the same time that Dragon City was captured, a total of 10 lords of Longyan County, Tingzhou County and Shaowu County of Minnan Province issued a joint statement, voluntarily abdicating their positions and accepting the reorganization of Shanghai City. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. There were only 16 lords in the 3 counties of Minnan Province, and more than half of them submitted to Shanghai City. Longyan County, which was close to Lingnan Province, was the most exaggerated. 4 of the 5 lords submitted to Shanghai City. The remaining lord was so scared that his face turned pale, and he immediately issued a message, voluntarily abdicating his position. In this way, Shanghai City conquered Longyan County without losing a single soldier. The 3rd Legion of the Brave Tiger Army received the military order and immediately advanced into Longyan County. While breaking the territorial stone tablets, they incorporated the armies of the 6 territories and marched towards Tingzhou County. Hua Tsubing, who had already stabilized Fuyong County, personally guarded Dragon City. At the same time, he ordered the Ma Chao Legion to advance into Shaowu County and cooperate with the allies of Shaowu County to encircle the remaining territories. For a while, the situation in Minnan Province changed. Di Chen and the others were shocked speechless by the series of battle reports. Xiongba broke the silence and asked, "What should we do now? Should we send more troops?" Xiongba hoped that the alliance would send more troops because if Shanghai City conquered the entire Minnan Province, he would not be able to sleep well. Di Chen shook his head firmly and said, "How can we send more troops? More than 70% of Minnan Province has already fallen into Shanghai City's hands. With Shanghai City's reserves of 1,000,000 soldiers, if we send 200,000, they can send 300,000. If we send 300,000, they can send 400,000. Minnan Province is already a swamp. If we fall into it, not only will we not get any benefits, but we will also drag the alliance down. When that time comes, will the organization still support us?" Di Chen's words made Xiongba's face turn pale. He realized that the worst situation had already happened. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.